Hello again everybody and welcome along to day 2 of the Hammer Series race in Limburg. Today is all about the sprint and we'll be explaining fully the format later on, but first let's have a quick talk about yesterday's stage, Simon. The climb, how brutal was that right from the very beginning?
It was absolutely savage. It's not often that you see a road race just detonate from the gun, but it did, didn't it? First lap it was split, it just split to bits. I mean, we had riders getting dropped after 2-3 kilometres.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It was interesting to look at social media yesterday, particularly from some of the riders. We'll get onto some of their data, which is very interesting, very impressive in fact, in a few moments' time. But one of my favourite tweets yesterday was from the very experienced Matt Heyman of Orica Scott. So really enjoyed the Hammer Series, but he felt more like the nail.
Yeah.
Which I think was probably apt for quite a few riders out there. If we look at the results from yesterday, let's not forget, this is all about the teams and not about the individual riders. Movistar really dominated courtesy of one man, Carlos Betancourt, who did cross the line first but also picked up the majority of the points for the Spanish team. So they ended up on 144.8 points, well ahead, 47 points ahead of Team Sunweb in second, and then Team Sky in third on 84.7 points. But notably, Si, we had 6 teams who didn't score a single point yesterday. They were out of it pretty much from the gun, never managed to get themselves back into the race. They would have had to go back to the drawing board last night.
They will. Now, it's a completely different type of race today, isn't it, given that it's going to be pan flat. So one would imagine we're going to see lots of different teams in the mix. But I think the thing to bear in mind at the end of today is that if a team wants to win this Hammer Series event overall, they need to be in the top 8 ranked teams. So the teams that are 9th to 16th will not be able to compete for the win. So they're going to split the field on the final day. It's going to be 2 different team time trials. And so the first team over the line in the top 8, so the final, if you like, will be crowned the winner. So today is going to be super important. Those teams with no points have to get some points in the bag.
Yeah, because I made a big mistake yesterday at the end of commentary in saying that given that Movistar had wrapped up the stage and therefore the 15 bonus seconds on offer for winning one of the stages, that they could kind of sit up and take things easy. But of course, what I neglected to think about was the fact that in ordering the teams, before they then have their bonus seconds, in ordering the teams for that final chase which comes tomorrow, in effect a team time trial pursuit, they accumulate the points over the first 2 stages, and incidentally it is that reason why there are decimal places on the point system, which are actually far more complicated than the ones that you see on the screen. The simple reason for that is that they don't want to have any teams which are on exactly the same points, which could very conceivably happen if it was simply 10, 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, etc. So you will see decimal places on the screen. Once again, we will be doing our very best to explain clearly this brand new format as we head through today's broadcast, because I know a few people were a little bit confused, but as Si points out, the winner is very simple. Whoever crosses the line first from the first group on tomorrow's team time trial will be the winners of the race.
That's right. It's going to be fantastic, that final team time trial, isn't it? I mean, genuinely, it's not often that you get that situation in a time trial where the first person across the line is the winner. But that's what we're going to get tomorrow. Brilliant. Yeah. But then before then, obviously, we have got a really pretty tough stage today, I think.
Yeah, it's not as tough in terms of the undulations as yesterday's course. A slightly longer one. We'll go into the details of that shortly. Before we go on to today's one, because we've got a few more minutes now before it starts, 14 minutes until today's stage starts, let's have a look at some of the data from the riders on yesterday's sprint, because looking through social media last night, it looked brutal on our screens, but the numbers really just go to prove just how brutal it was. Tom Dumoulin, for example, recent winner, of course, of the Giro d'Italia. There's his stats up on your screen for you right now. 481 watts for a 4-minute period at one point, and a 306 watt average for just over 2 hours for the entire stage. What you can't see on that screen, though, is that the normalised power for Tom Dumoulin was close to 400 watts.
That's right.
For the 2 hours.
So normalised power, you'll remember, is the power effectively that if he was pedalling for the whole time, it would average out at. So it gives you a much better representation of just how hard he's trying. Because of the nature of yesterday's route, they were either going flat out up a hill, or they were therefore going down the other side. There was virtually no flat road, was there, on that thing? So that's why his average power is 306, but his normalised power was 396. But then his power was dwarfed by Stefan Kung, wasn't it, of Team BMC. He was also in that lead group. He averaged out as 425 watts for 2 hours for normalised power. Now, if you're not familiar with watts, 425, what would you say? That's like, that would be winning Tour de France stages up Alps if you were like a 70 kilo rider. Yeah. I mean, that's just a phenomenal amount of power to put out. It's, you know, truly world class.
Yeah, I think it goes to show how much difference it makes to be a heavier rider versus a light rider. But nonetheless, when you look at those numbers, it really was just quite incredible how much power those guys were having to put out. And it went to show you why the riders who weren't at the front of the race after the first lap pretty much had no chance of coming back, because even with a very concerted chase behind, the amount of power you'd have had to have done just to get onto the back wheel of that group would have been monstrous, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it was. And what was really interesting, I thought, yesterday, going back to the data, was actually that normally in a road race you'd expect to see a hard first hour and then the race relaxes and then the final hour is flat out. Whereas because it detonated from the gun, I think riders saw their maximum powers on the first, second and third laps, and after that everyone was so tired, having gone into the red so deeply, that actually they were then just surviving, all of them, whether it was the lead group or the peloton. The pace dropped, their power dropped, even their heart rates dropped.
Yeah, we saw some very big riders go bang, didn't we? Firstly, Caleb Ewan, perhaps that wasn't the course, of course, which suited him the best. It would be more for today for the young Australian sprinter. But Tim Wellens was a bit of a surprise. Even Philippe Gilbert, he also tweeted about how hard and how far into the red he was going on the climbs yesterday. So given that that was the first race of a brand new series yesterday, I think a lot of riders and a lot of the managers will have learned an awful lot from the first day. And if they weren't nervous on the start line yesterday, Si, even though the course is slightly flatter today, I think we're going to see a big fight to get to the front by the end of the neutralised zone, which is short, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think people are going to be on the start line ready to go from the gun. But the fact is, we don't know exactly how today is going to pan out, do we? Because yesterday we had I think it was unexpected that a group stayed away all day. So we had effectively the same 7 riders contesting that sprint every lap. Whereas today you would imagine perhaps that people were going to stay together a little bit more, and therefore we might see a bit more interactions, breakaways perhaps going for shorter periods of time. What do you think?
Yeah, could well do. I mean, let's take a look at the course that they are going to be riding today. It is longer in terms of pure distance, although the duration that they take will probably be about the same. Yesterday's predicted average speed 36 k's per hour, but they actually ended up with a 38 kilometres per hour average speed. Predicted average speed for today is between 46 and 50 k's per hour, so it is predicted to be very fast indeed. It's 12.4 kilometres in length each circuit, and they will do that on 8 occasions. The top 10 riders over the finish line, just like yesterday, will receive points which are put towards their team to give us a team ranking at the end of it. The team ranking will give the teams various bonus seconds which will be added to the chase on the last day, and an accumulation of the points from today and yesterday will give us our final standings, and therefore where you will start in the team chase coming tomorrow. There are double points again today, coming at the end of lap 2, at the end of lap 5, and on the finish line at the end of 99.2 kilometres of racing. It is far flatter. It is based around the sports zone in Limburg, which is a dedicated sporting site, not just for cycling, but an incredible facility, in fact. I think this is where the bike park Tom Dumoulin is not too far away from. But they've even got a man-made cobbled, well, all cobbled roads are man-made, obviously, but a specific cobbled climb that they've put within this centre so that kids can safely train over the cobbles that they might face when they're older.
Yeah, it's a super cool thing, isn't it? More Grand Tour winners surely coming out of that part of the Netherlands. Now, Dan, it's obviously not just us here today as well. We've got Tom Last in Statistician's Corner. Tom is going to be manning the comments as well. So yesterday we had a couple of caption competitions during the race where you were able to win some GCN swag. We had some cracking captions. Probably we'll go back to MC Hammer theme again today because, you know, that's a winner, let's face it. But Tom, what are you going to be asking for, mate, in the comments?
I think we're just going to see how it goes. We want you guys to share the video as much as possible. Just get involved in the comments and yeah, just let Si know what you think of his Hammer series or MC Hammer Time.
Isn't the Coke? Yeah, that's right. If you would like to share this video with your friends, because this is a fairly unique opportunity to view some top level racing live over the internet, which is not something that always happens, is it? So share it with your friends. We will be live on air for the next 2 hours, and we have got now 8 minutes until the second day starts. And to remind you, that is the sprint. A 12.4 kilometre lap covered on 8 occasions, with points available at the end of each and every lap. In terms of the elevation gain, there's still 100 metres apparently of elevation gain per lap, although far less difficult than yesterday's stage, but still not completely flat today. I haven't actually looked at the wind out there, but Robin McEwen in his pre-race look at the course today says that could be a big factor, because it is on very open roads on the back part of the circuit.
I hate to say it, Dan, but I'm quite surprised that you haven't looked at the wind direction yet, because it does feel a little bit like you might be slipping. Whilst you are checking Wind Finder, why don't we have a look at who are the riders that we really want to be keeping an eye out for today? Because yesterday, looking at the team compositions, I wondered whether actually it was going to be Team Sky and Team Orica Scott that were going to be best placed today. Obviously, Movistar have that commanding lead, but Sky and Orica, courtesy of a fantastic ride from Theo Gegenhardt and also Luke Durbridge for Orica Scott, are both really in contention. And with Team Sky particularly having Elia Viviani, who is the Olympic points champion, you've got to draw parallels, I think, haven't you, between this Hammer Series sprint event and an Olympic, or any, in fact, track points race, whereby riders have to sprint every few laps to accumulate points. I mean, it is exactly the same thing. Yeah. The only difference here is that Viviani's going to have 4 teammates.
Yeah, that is true, although I'm surprised that one of those wasn't Owain Doull.
Yeah.
To remind you, each team can select 7 riders before the start of a Hammer Series event, and from that 7 they have to pick 5 for each of the stages, and you can transfer between them. You don't have to name them all, the 5 before the start for all 3 stages. The teams would have put in their final start list for today, for example, at 12 o'clock local time, so a couple of hours ago.
Quite a lot of substitutions. You obviously can't read that, but all those orange highlighted names, those are riders that didn't race yesterday, including, perhaps ominously, Gaviria.
Yeah.
So Fernando Gaviria, who is himself a top points race champion over on the track, so he's riding for Quick-Step Floors. He too is probably going to be one of the strongest riders in the race.
Right, well, we have now got a look here at the course as we look down on Limburg, so you can get to see what they are going to be dealing with today. As you can see from the start, it is reasonably technical. Double left-hand turn followed by a few corners before they get out onto the course proper. It is, as I said, just over 12 kilometres per lap, 12.4 kilometres to be exact. This is the point at which it could be affected by the wind, but it's
what is the wind?
17 km per hour easterly wind today, so it shouldn't be too much of a factor on the race.
What's that? That's going to be it's mainly going to be either head or tail, isn't it, on the way this course looks? So not much crosswind.
Westerly, sorry. But either way, yeah, it's coming from the left-hand side as you look at it on the screen right now. So they will have tailwind home towards the sprint line each and every lap.
Yeah. Now, given the different format of this Hammer Series event, I believe we've got an explainer just as the riders are on the line now. If you watch this next little clip, then this should tell you all you need to know, so you will be understanding this race perfectly as we start.
The Hammer Sprint. Now, the Hammer Sprint is another points race, but this time taking place over 8 laps of a flat 12.4 kilometre circuit with the start and finish in Sittard-Geleen at the Sports Zone Limburg. Total distance 99.2 kilometres. Once again, points will be awarded for the first 10 teams to get a rider over the line at the end of each lap, with double points on offer on laps 2, 5 and 8. And the top 10 will again receive descending bonus seconds that will contribute to their starting position in the Hammer Chase. Now, the team with the most points wins the Hammer Sprint, and the team with the most accumulated points over both the climb and sprint days starts the chase in first position. Explosive power, economy of effort and tactical team prowess will be the order of the day.
There we go then. So about 3 minutes now until we will be starting the sprint stage. Let's just go through some of the key sprinters. You've already done some of them, Si.
Yeah.
We haven't got Andre Greibel. He is a rider that is missing from today's stage, but unfortunately he's succumbed to a fever, which apparently he got a couple of nights ago and hasn't managed to recover from it in time to take part. So that really is a great shame. There's the team list for you. Bahrain Merida heading it up with BMC, Cannondale, Lotto Star, Movistar, Lotto NL Jumbo, Orica Scott and Quick Step Floors, all of course World Tour squads. The race is made up of 12 World Tour squads and 4 invited teams, and you can see those 4 on the bottom of that list now. The Spanish squad Caja Rural, the Israel Cycling Academy with our friend Zachary Dempster within that squad, Nippo Vinny Fantini, and the local squad Roompot Nederlandse Lotterij. 5 riders each, so that's a total of 80 riders once again on the start line today, and they've literally now got about 2 minutes until the flag will drop and they will begin the neutralised zone.
Yeah.
Without Andre Greipel though, Lotto Soudal still got a couple of good sprinters in the form of Jens de Bousseré, who won a stage recently at the Tour of Belgium, and Morena Hofland, who has come over from the other Lotto team, Lotto NL Jumbo, where he was the main sprinter for the last couple of years. So all not lost for them without the gorilla.
Well, you'd hope not, because they are in the very perilous position of 9th overall. So as it stands, Lotto Soudal will not be in the race for the overall victory, so from 1st to 8th. They need to do some serious work today, don't they, to overhaul Team Lotto NL Jumbo or Quick Step Floors. Both of those are reasonably close, as are Nippo Vinny Fantini. By the way, just so you know, I wasn't just being rude being on my phone there. Being a Velon event, if you head over to the Velon app, so if you download it on your phone, then you get loads and loads of live rider data. So we're going to be checking it out all race, so we'll be telling you the stats, but if you want to see for yourself, go onto the Velon app and then you can choose. There's some big hitters on there today displaying their data. A lot of the sprinters, we've got Caleb Ewan on there, Danny Van Poppel, we've got Viviani, we've got some big key lead out guys as well, so definitely worth doing, checking out the Velon app there.
Yeah, and it's once again going to be very intriguing today, because although we're going through all the big names when it comes to sprinting, so Gaviria, Caleb Ewan, etc, etc, what they're used to doing is waiting in the wheels until 200 metres to go at the end of a 4, 5 or 6 hour stage and doing one effort. This, as you rightly point out, by looking at the riders who do the track's points race, is one where you have to do multiple efforts, and you might not even have any kind of lead out from your team, so that is going to completely change the dynamic, and it might not be those top sprinters who are best at a race like today. I mean, we certainly didn't expect Carlos Betancourt to dominate like he did yesterday.
No, absolutely. Okay, just as we're about to start, I think, what's your money on, Dan? Are we going to get a breakaway dominate today, or are we going to get a bunch that pretty much stays together and they just constantly attack each other?
I'm almost certain that we will get splits at some point, but I think everyone is going to be so much more vigilant over the first part of the race, given what they know happened yesterday, and given that it's flat today, it will be slightly easier for it to stay together. But yeah, you can see a few nervous riders there on the start line. We've got BMC edging forward.
Looks a little bit like a false start already, Dan. I think Caja Rural there probably. Oh, Roompot really going for the false start there.
There we go, and they are off for the first of 8 laps of this 12.4 kilometre circuit. They have got a very short neutralised section, although I'm afraid I couldn't see in the rulebook exactly how long that was. But as soon as the flag drops from our leading mini cars there at the front, the riders will be let off the leash, and I think we're going to see attacks once again right from the gun, but not from your usual second division teams who try to get riders up the road for extra publicity. Even the star riders are going to have to be right at the front from the very beginning today.
Yeah, Dan, I cannot tell you how excited I am. I mean, I'm always excited. I'm always excited watching bike racing, but this, watching a race from the very start, I couldn't be more excited to see what happens. It's the novelty factor, the fact that we don't know what the team tactics are going to be. Yesterday, I think, surprised me. I think it surprised a lot of people. But today, it's a whole new ball game.
One of the things I'm wondering that could possibly be a tactic for today, you can see that after they cross the hammer line, which you can see right in the centre of your screen right now, they take a left-hand corner and almost a hairpin left, if you just sit back ever so slightly and decide with a few riders or maybe even a couple of riders from your team not to go flat out for the sprint itself, but then to just hit them after they've gone right into the red and done the big sprinting, around a few corners there, you can start to get a gap between yourselves and the rest of the team.
Devious tactics there, Dan. Yeah. Devious tactics, yeah. Okay, before the flag officially drops and we leave the neutralised zone, Tom, what's going on in the comment section, mate?
We're getting a lot of love in the comments. People are very interested to know what type of gluten-free beer you're drinking, Si.
Are they? It's a Brewdog Vagabond, American Pale Ale. It's quite a floral little number, but very nice.
Free plug there for Brewdog. They're also having a go at Dan for drinking flat beer. There's a bit of chat looking forward to tomorrow, wondering about how they're going to stop people drafting. But yeah, just a load of excitement. Excited for the first ever caption competition.
Yeah, I guess before they actually kick off, a quick note about tomorrow's team time trial. They are starting at fairly small gaps, so at a minimum 30 seconds between the first and the second teams, but less between the consecutive teams after that. So the idea is that they do catch each other, hopefully, for the excitement, but they are not allowed to then draft. So from that point of view, it will be exactly the same as an individual time trial, where if you catch your minute man or you get caught, you're not allowed to sit behind them. And presumably it's going to be on quite wide road, so if they are going down at the same speed, there's plenty of room for the teams on the road.
Yeah, now Dan, looking at the start line here, or the routing behind the neutral cars, interesting to see Sepp van Mark is keen not to make the same mistake as yesterday, where he was really caught out, wasn't he, at the start, and got dropped early on. So he is right at the front now. Who else do you think is going to be looking to make an impact from the get-go? That's 3 Cannondale Drapac guys I can see on the front row there.
Well, I think the team that were most disappointed, I would imagine, with yesterday's performance, apart from Cannondale, who ended up 10th with just 2.3 points, would have been Trek Segafredo, because actually they lined up with a team which I thought were very capable on yesterday's stage, and again very capable on today's as well. They've got 2 decent sprinters, Jackman Zola, who is the Italian national champion. He has been hampered by injury so far this year. Did have a couple of half-decent results at the Giro d'Italia before he succumbed to illness there. But they've also got Jasper Stuyven, who finished second in the points classification at the Giro to Fernando Gaviria. So with them and Boy Van Poppel at the helm as well, and the US champion Daniel Gregory, I think they're going to have to hope they can make up somewhat for the fact that they didn't get any points on yesterday's stage.
Yeah. Yesterday, you could imagine fatigue from the Giro d'Italia would probably have been hampering people. You know, Tom Dumoulin said he was absolutely nailed, and that's one reason why he's not taking the start line today.
I wish I could do 400 watts normalised power when I'm absolutely nailed for 2 hours.
Well, yeah, me too. But what do you think today, Dan, in terms of the sprint event? Is that Giro d'Italia fatigue going to be in the legs of someone like Stuyven?
Possibly, yeah, but Gaviria also finished the Giro d'Italia, didn't he? Whereas Caleb Ewan, he went home about a week to go before the final rest day, so he has had a little bit longer to freshen up. It's very difficult to know how you're going to come out of a 3-week race, especially for something so as intense as a race like today. We saw that yesterday, despite the fatigue of Tom Dumoulin, he was more than capable of being up there. In fact, he got better as the race progressed. It'll be interesting to see, once again, whether they are better, the same as, or worse than likes of Dylan Groenewegen, who hasn't come out of the Giro d'Italia, and the other sprinters who are in the same situation.
You did it one year, didn't you? Giro, then Dauphiné. You must have been feeling it, to put it mildly.
Yeah, well, especially when you're a rider that struggles to just get through each and every stage of the Grand Tour. You dig an even deeper hole.
Right, do we know how much longer we've got for neutral? They're on big roads now, aren't they? So we are going to be expecting the flag to drop.
Shouldn't be too long now. So they're taking them outside of the tech zone and the sports zone, where they started and where the finish line is located. They've got a few corners to deal with, but any moment now that they're on this big road, that red flag should drop, and then they are free to race.
We can see at the moment that there's some pretty chilled out riders. We've got heart rates of Daniel Oss of just 100 beats a minute, so that's not bad for riding at 30 odd k an hour. Same with Michael Hepburn, not much power out yet, but interestingly Remy Cavagna, the young prodigy for Quick Step Floors, has already put out close to 1,000 watts, so that's his maximum power, which in the neutral zone is telling you something, that guys are really fighting for position and looking to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, well, you get that still. I mean, the only other race I can think of like this where riders would be so nervous before the gun goes off was the Tour of Qatar, where I was once lined up next to Tom Bone on a day that we knew was going to be split up by crosswinds right from the very beginning. I looked across at him and his heart rate was 119.
No.
Yeah, and he said, I feel like a junior again, which is exactly what his sports director Tom Steele said should be the tactic for the Quick Step floor squad yesterday. No tactics, just race again like your juniors, and I would imagine that will be the same ethos for most of the teams today.
Yeah, I'm guessing a lot of riders here are going to be more familiar with this style of racing compared to yesterday, because there is a type of race called a kermesse, which is pretty much found in Belgium and the Netherlands, isn't it? And it's basically contested on short circuits of about 10 kilometres, and a lot of pro riders will use kermesses as training. And because it's a training race, it's full gas, rarely any team tactics, a lot of riders just racing for themselves, and so you find that the race completely blows to bits. Okay, I think we're off.
Yeah, the flag has dropped, and immediately Sepp van Mark is onto the wheel of one of the Roompot riders who are trying to take advantage of slipstreaming some of the cars. But as you can see, it's far less technical, this opening part of the circuit, than yesterday's was, and of course far less hilly, being the sprint as well. Tom van Asbroek there in third place for Cannondale as well. Caleb Ewan also being particularly attentive. But Sepp van Mark, he's not one of the best sprinters in this race, and it's visible that he wants to try and get himself clear with a small group before they get to the first crossing of the finish line.
Well, he is one of those riders you would expect to be most familiar with this type of racing. Not necessarily the sprinting for points every lap, but in terms of attacking again, flat roads, exposed. So I think we could expect to see him in the mix quite a lot today, wouldn't you thought?
Yeah, you would expect so, but it's going to take a while, I think, for the breakaway to go today. But it will soon tire the riders out, because of course, over the Giro d'Italia, we did have the opportunity to watch some of the racing from kilometre zero, and that was really interesting because it's quite rare that you get to see the early break trying to form. What you would have seen there, though, is a field of 180 plus riders even in the second week of racing, whereas today, with only 80, there's less riders from each team to share the workload, and so the fatigue will kick in slightly quicker, so we could see gaps starting to open up and breakaways going reasonably early on.
Yeah, the other thing to mention as well at this point is that with teams only having 5 riders, it's going to be really hard to control the race. So if a team does miss a breakaway, then actually trying to bring it back and still save a couple of riders for the sprint is going to be almost impossible. So do you think there's the chance that we're going to see some inter-team alliances? You know, particularly the lower ranked teams getting together to try and boost their overall?
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, Nippo Fantini did very well yesterday, didn't they? And Marco Canolo is their number 141 today, and he's a decent sprinter, especially from a small group. So they could well be finding themselves up in the top 8 of the overall classification as a team at the end of the day if they play things well. Small gap opening up now between 8 riders there at the front, still with Sepp van Mark up there, but not a huge gap, and you can see that there is already a reaction behind from the teams who have missed it. We've got Quick Step represented at the front, we have BMC here as well.
Caleb Ewan tucked in the mix there, that's a surprise.
Yeah, behind, I think that's Theo Gegenhardt, the rider who came off yesterday after a sterling performance on the climb stage, bringing it back for Team Sky. Now Theo is not a sprinter, is he? He's a great climber and he's great on punchy climbs as well. He's good at time trialling, but I think even by his own admission, he's not got the fastest sprint on the line. So they can use a rider like Theo to just cover these attacks, bring it back as he has done now, in order that they haven't missed the crucial move.
No, but he's a young rider.
Oh, we got a crash! Oh. Looks like Brambilla there on the Quick Step riders is down, and we've also got Ilisari is the rider there from the Caja Rural squad, and that is a disaster. When you started off at such a high speed, it's going to be very, very hard to get yourself back on, and one rider out of a 9-man team is not a huge deal, but when it's 5-man teams at the start, as you can see, just trying to bunny hop over the central reservation there. Oh my goodness.
Oh man.
That was a slow motion crash for Brambilla, wasn't it?
They often hurt the most, the slow-mo ones, though, don't they? Where you just, there's no sliding, it's just up and then slap onto the tarmac. The other thing that's going to be difficult for them is that the convoy, so the number of race cars that follow the race, you can see one just there going through the Caja Rural team car. There's only one per team, isn't there? So actually it's going to be a little bit shorter, and so there is a slight risk that if they take too long to get back up and running, then they may well struggle to regain the race. I don't think there's an issue here, given that everyone's back up and riding quickly, but that is something to bear in mind.
Yeah,
because Yeah, once you're out of this, then that is it. Game over, isn't it? You will get pulled out if you're lapped.
Yeah, looking at the overhead shot there, though, it didn't look like it was anything to do with the central reservation for Irisari, did it? He simply lost grip from his tyres as he went round the corner, and an unfortunate Brambilla there getting caught up in the accident. And here's a look into the team car of Quick-Step with Tom Steels.
He looks like he's got some concentration going on, doesn't he? That's a concentration face, if ever there was one. What do you think their team tactics are going to be today then, Dan? Given that yesterday he said there were no tactics, it's just full gas. He's getting Brambilla on the bumper there to try and pace him back on.
Well, I was about to say I think they will save Gaviria as much as they can in the opening part of the race, but just as I was about to say it, here he is on the attack at the front, and that's one thing we learnt about Gaviria at the Giro d'Italia. Apart from the fact that he is a phenomenal sprinter, he is not afraid of heading up the road and really showing himself, which is fantastic to see for a bunch sprinter. And that actually is already quite a significant gap. He's got a BMC rider there for company. I think that might be Jasper Stuyven there for Trek Segafredo as well. Let's not forget that at the start of today, Quick-Step Floors found themselves in 7th place on just 53 points. So they too have got quite a lot to do to make things up and try and close the gap down to Movistar, which is going to be crucial for their time trial position tomorrow. That is in fact Boy Van Poppel, I think, from Trek Segafredo, who's made this group. Edmondson there from Orica Scott is also a decent sprinter, but it has come back together again.
The pace is really on there, isn't it? I mean, you can see from that helicopter shot just how fast they're going. The data on the Velon app is showing us currently that they're doing about 56, 57, 58 k's an hour, which on a flat road is still shifting, so isn't it?
Yeah, it's very much shifting. That's what, 33, 34 miles per hour that they're doing on average, roughly, on this opening part of the Hammer Sprint. Less than 90 k's to go now, so they've burned through the first few kilometres very quickly indeed. No news yet on whether Brambilla has managed to make it back into this group, but that is going to be hard. As you said, Si, the convoy here, being just one team car versus two behind the main group, is going to be far shorter than a normal race. So if you do sit on the ground too long, it takes you a little bit longer to recover, you could well find yourself out of that convoy, and at that point it's going to be very difficult to make your way back in.
Yeah. Now, another thing I've just picked up from looking at the rider data, obviously you can't ever glean too much from a rider's heart rate, but Caleb Ewan, currently his heart rate is well north of 180 beats per minute, which for a rider who, you know, you might normally expect to be sat in, sheltered in the peloton, being looked after by his teammates, he's clearly getting stuck in. We can see him there in vision, and so it's obviously everybody going all out early doors.
Well, one team we haven't seen anything of so far is the Movistar squad, who won yesterday's climb with a significant advantage, let's not forget. They do start, once again, of course, with 5 riders today, but when you look down the list, none of them really look to be sprinters. They've got Carlos Barbera, they've got Betancourt, who was dominant yesterday, Hector Carretero, Alex Dowsett, who's much more of a time trial rider, of course, and then Marc Soler, former winner of the Tour de l'Avenir and 3rd in Catalonia this year. He's far more of a climber than a sprinter, so it could be difficult for them to pick up points on today's race.
Yeah, we did wonder yesterday, didn't we, about whether or not Movistar may well have got the tactics spot on, because they brought some great climbers. They obviously amassed a whole load of points yesterday, and actually maybe yesterday is the day where it's easier to control the race as such, because it's, you know, the strongest guys rise to the top naturally on hilly stages, whereas today there's a lot more tactical permutations that could really come into force.
Right, well, 2 riders here at the front now. That is now Jasper Stuyven in the red of Trek Segafredo. And then the rider from Team UAE Emirates is Yusuf Mirza, who's actually the national champion of that country. It's his first year in the World Tour. We've seen him in the races like the Dubai Tour and the Abu Dhabi Tour for a number of years. And here is the American champion, who's just been split off the back. A couple of Nippo Vini Fantini riders losing the wheel there. There's Brambilla riding for Quick-Step. He was the rider that was on the floor, but you can see the pace that's been injected into the front of this group. And Teo Gegenhardt there, putting his arm out saying, I'm going to give you some... Was that Ian Boswell, in fact? Boswell putting his arm out saying, I'm going to give you a slingshot back to the bunch because I'm about to get dropped. And that is a huge indication of just how fast this race has been already, because Boswell, whilst a climber, is more than capable of holding a very high speed on the flat.
Yeah, he is, absolutely. This is just incredible. It gives you an impression of just how fast Stuyven's going as well, given that gap is now quite sizable.
Yeah, 2 riders coming across from behind. We've got one from Kakarurao, and I think that is once again Sepp van Mark who's decided to try and launch his move. Look at the speed here at the back. That's got to be more than 60 km per hour right there.
Well, let me try and tell you, Dan. I'm going to consult my data.
I'm going to get my app up as well.
Yeah, go on, mate. In the meantime, whilst we're loading apps, Tom, what's going on in the comment section?
We're getting a load of good questions through, actually, Si. Just let me skip back to my questions document. I'll dig a few of them out. So, someone called Cycling Puppet is asking if the riders are going to celebrate each sprint. At the moment, it doesn't look like they're going to have time to even think about taking their hands off the bars, to be honest.
Well, we will see. I don't think it's long now before they're going to come up to the end of the first lap. In fact, 250 metres to go for our front group, and more attacks coming from behind. Sepp van Mark has launched his sprint for Cannondale Drapac on the right-hand side of your screens. It looks like he is going to take maximum points at the end of the first lap, or is Stuyven going to come round? Oh, Van Mark first, Stuyven second. Looks like Lobato from the Lotto NL Jumbo coming across in 4th place. Hopefully we'll get the graphics up as soon as possible on the first 10 riders across the line who've scored points. And it looks as though Team Sunweb managed to get 2 inside the top 10. One of those being the huge rider Max Walscheid, as well as Raymond Sinkeldam up there as well. So we'll have the top 10 up on the screen very shortly indeed. But that was a very close run thing, wasn't it?
It was. I'm wondering whether this is going to be the pattern for the race now. We've just seen that breakaway almost caught on the line, now sat up. This is the point where sneaky riders like Dan Lloyd are going to be looking to attack. I think we're seeing it straight away, in fact. Counter-attacks going already.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be the crucial point after every single lap. When you've gone deep into the red, you've produced upwards of 1,300 watts sprinting towards the line. That is the point at which you're at your most vulnerable from attackers from behind who've saved their energy ever so slightly and have the energy left to go into the breakaway. So that's exactly what these guys have tried to do. We can see that on the front right now it's Daniel Oss from Team BMC, closely followed by Alex Dowsett, who's being very tentative, looking behind him to see who's heading up the road. We've got Matthias Brendele, the stage winner of the time trial at the recent Tour of Belgium. And I think that's Ghana as well from Team UAE Emirates, who's a former winner of the Under-23 Paris-Roubaix. So he's going to be very at home on this flat circuit as well.
Yeah, look at Viviani. I just caught sight of his face as they were coming up to the corner. He is looking as cool as a cucumber, isn't he? Absolutely relaxed. Again, we've got to mention he's got an awful lot of experience in events of a similar nature to this in the points races on the track. So he knows that perhaps the points for laps 1, 2 and 3 aren't necessarily that important, and that if he stays strong later in the race, where there's double points on offer on laps 5 and then on the finish line on the end of lap 8, perhaps that is when he's really going to be going.
Right, well, we've got confirmation of the standings after lap 1. As you can see, it was Sepp van Mark who crossed the line in first place, but Cannondale also managed to get somebody else inside the top 10. So they picked themselves up a total of 11.5 points in the first crossing of the line. Trek Segafredo close behind on 8.1, Kakarurao on 6.6, and notably all these teams that are at the top on the first sprint day, let's not forget we've still got quite a way to go, but the teams on the top after the first sprint, in the top 3 at least, are the ones that were well down the order yesterday.
They are going to be breathing a sigh of relief, I would have thought. They've at least got some decent points in the bag now.
Team Sunweb, meanwhile, they crossed the line 4th, and they were up there in the top 3 yesterday. So on aggregate, Team Sunweb, if things continue like that today, could find themselves in a very good position heading into tomorrow's team time trial chase. 5th place across the line, Team Lotto NL Jumbo, then Bahrain Merida, then UAE Emirates. Israeli cycling team picking up 1.9 points. So only 8 teams inside the top 10 today, which means 2 teams, of course, had 2 riders in the top 10 across the line. So lots of work to do still for Quick Step Floors, who didn't pick up any points.
Yeah. I'm wondering, Dan, given that we've just seen strong performances there on just the first lap from Cannondale Drapac and also Trek Segafredo, how much do you think the orders and the pep talk of the director sportives are ringing in the ears of those riders? I mean, they look like they've just really, really got the bit between their teeth, don't they?
Well, I think the sports directors who are governing the tactics are, quite frankly, rank amateurs, aren't they? Like everybody that's watching this race, like us commentating on it, like the riders doing it. They've never done anything like this before with pro racers, because Pretty much every race of any importance on the calendar has been around for decades. There are some new races, but even those, you can study the course, you can look at the competitors that you're racing against, and you can know pretty much from the outset what's going to happen and roughly when it's going to happen too, based on where the climbs come, based on whether there's crosswinds, etc, etc. On this type of racing, no one's got any idea when the move's going to go, so you've got to be attentive all the time. And it looks like what we said has kind of come true, hasn't it? We've got Roger Kluge here at the front, and this group has split off from the main peloton. Quick Step up here with Yves Lampard. We've got one of the riders from Team Roompot up there as well. Roger Kluge was a guy that you mentioned earlier as somebody with a massive track pedigree, silver medalist at the Beijing Olympics a few years, sorry, at the Rio Olympics last year, wasn't it? Was it last year actually, where he got a silver medal in the Omnium?
I think it was last year, yeah. 2016.
Yeah. Right, anyway, he's a part of this front group with Orica Scott. We've got BMC Racing represented with Daniel Oss. Alex Dowsett's managed to get himself in here for Movistar. Brendele, so 2 time trialists without much of a sprint up here towards the front. In terms of the best sprinters, Lampard, who's in the blue here for Quick Step Floors, as well as Daniel Oss, as well as Roger Kluge, and behind Sunweb have missed it. And this is the big difference between yesterday and today. Teams that have missed it today have the ability to try and chase it back, because with the course being much easier than yesterday's, you're not in the red quite so often.
No, you're not. Really interesting to see, actually. Alex Dowsett, even though he's in that breakaway, is looking very composed. His heart rate is only about 150 beats per minute, so that's quite a sort of a moderate intensity, you would have thought, and his power is not that high either, so less than 200 watts when he sat in. So that's like the kind of pace that you'd probably be able to sustain quite comfortably, you know, for a long, long ride, isn't it?
Well, he's having a bit of an argument at the moment with the rider from Team Roompot NL Lottery. He was refusing to work, the Dutch rider, and Alex Dowsett was trying to persuade him through, but he was completely refusing. So they found themselves a little way off the back of that group. And that is going to upset things at the front and make the chase easier, because the speed will come out of that leading group if not everyone is willing to cooperate.
Well, we saw Roompot on the front of the peloton, didn't we? Just waiting in the wings behind Sunweb. Presumably, if that rider's going to be sat on, and they're looking to bring this one back then, potentially.
Yeah. Well, 7 laps still remaining and 7 crossings of the finish line. This is the first double points lap, should I say. So at the end of this one, 20 points for the first rider across the line, and all of the other points doubled as well. So we will keep you up to date with the scoring as we go along. Hopefully the graphics will come up on the screen. That is out of our control, but we have got access to the points as we go along, so we'll keep you informed vocally, and hope to see the graphics on the screen as well. Who's riding behind now? So Cannondale Drapac are of course another team who once again have missed the breakaway today. Looks like we've got problems there for 107, that being Boy Van Poppel.
I can't quite see what's wrong there, actually. His bike looks okay.
Possibly he's just been lashade.
Oh, he's not too far off the back. Presumably
No.
he's going to get back on. Very strange. Now, if you are new to the Hammer Series, if you only just joined us, we should probably do a quick recap about exactly how this race pans out, because it's not your usual pro cycling race. Although we will get someone crossing the line first, obviously overall today, it's not about the individual, this is about the teams. And in order to decide who is the winner, which team is the winner, they will be accumulating points every lap as they go across the finish line, and the individual riders will accumulate points that then goes to an overall tally. So that's why we're seeing an awful lot of action a whole way through the race.
Well, this is an interesting point in the race, isn't it? Because we've got a very, very strong group of 7 at the front. And at this point, it just goes to show you how quickly you need to react tactically as a team behind that have missed it. Because with the quality that's in this group, if it got to 40, 50 seconds, they'd be away, wouldn't they? It'd be very, very hard for any team behind to make any inroads into that kind of gap. There's your current standings for the sprint stage today. 11.5 for Cannondale Drapac, a further 3.4 points back to Trek Segafredo. Kakarurao doing very well to get 3rd place at the moment, and Sunweb probably the best on aggregate so far over the first 2 days. They're sitting on 4th place, but as you can see, a whole host of teams who didn't pick up any points the first time across the line, but still plenty of laps to go. 7 times across the line still to go, and 3 of those offer double points.
Now, Dan, something that I'm quite intrigued to see what pans out is that normally when a breakaway will work really cohesively, until they get within sight of the finish line. But given the importance of every time we cross the finish line today, I wonder whether or not we're going to see the cohesion go from the break. We saw it on the first lap where there was that break that had a reasonable advantage, and there was a little bit of cat and mouse because obviously the riders are not just going to want to be having their heads down, pedalling as hard as they can. They're going to want to save their legs to try and out-sprint their 6 breakaway companions. So I wonder whether we're going to see a bit of gamesmanship each lap, and then thus allowing the peloton to close that gap.
Yeah, that could possibly come into play, but the gap at the moment between those riders and the peloton, to me, looks like it is extending ever so slightly. If we have a look down the teams who've missed it, we've already mentioned Cannondale, Sunweb have been working on the front as well. Lotto Soudal have missed it, as have Team Sky. And they've put a rider on the front once again in the form of Theo Gegenhardt, with his nemesis, Carlos Betancourt from Movistar, sitting on his wheel. Now, Betancourt will not work because he's got Alex Dowsett in at the front of the race at the moment, so he won't be contributing to the chase behind. But Gegenhardt, he's flying, isn't he? Yesterday he was flying on the climbs. The speed that he was going just a few moments ago there on the flat was something to behold.
Yeah, I wonder whether the mentality of just getting stuck in, like we heard the Quick-Step Floors team boss Tom Steels tell his riders yesterday, because often if you're there and you're aggressive, actually you end up feeling an awful lot better. If you feel like you're on the back foot, then you can end up, as Matt Heyman said on Twitter last night, feeling like the nail rather than the hammer. You are just getting your head kicked in, can't you? I did some old school counting down. I think that gap's only about 15 seconds, so it's not a game over by any stretch of the imagination with the peloton, even coming into the end of this lap, which we're not far away from doing.
Yeah, this is going to sound like a very stupid thing to say, but it's a very different kind of 15 seconds on this sort of thing, isn't it?
Well, that's true.
Given the intensity and the speed and the quality of the rides at the front, this is not like the end of a flat stage of the Tour de France where a 15-second gap to a 7-rider group is easily closable because they've been out there all day, they're tired, and you've got fresh legs on the front of the bunch. The speed that they're going out there, which will be between, I'd say, 55 and 60 km per hour on the flats at the moment, we saw how quickly Theo Gegenhardt was going on the front, and that side shot was really quite incredible, wasn't it? Just gave you a real sense of how fast they were going.
Yeah, back over 60k an hour again on that stretch of road.
Wow.
So maybe that's where your westerly 17 km an hour tailwind is coming in down.
Yeah. So anyway, but it didn't make any inroads really into the gap that these guys have got here at the front, and that goes to show you just how hard it is to close any kind of a gap down on this sort of a race, which is only going to be around about 2 hours long. It does give everybody the confidence that they're not going to blow up, they're not going to run out of legs because it's such a short race.
Yeah, Dan, who out of this little breakaway then has your backing for the sprint there? What's going to be the order, do you think?
Well, on paper you'd have to say Roger Kluger and Edmondson from Orica Scott, both of whom have got a very good track pedigree. Also Lampard, he's got his decent sprint on him at the end of a race, and also from a group as well, so it could be close between the three of them. You would imagine that Alex Dowsett is going to struggle against the quality of the riders that's in that group. Look at it strung out in the back though, and that string just isn't anywhere near as long, of course, when it's an 80 rider group, or 73 probably as we've got here now, versus the peloton that you see in standard pro races. That
gap does look like it's come down ever so slightly, doesn't it? The fact that the peloton can easily see that breakaway in front is going to add to the incentive. I would imagine they're going to stay away over the finish line for this lap, but then I wonder whether the impetus will go out on that sneaky corner that comes after the finish line.
Yeah, they really need to bring it back sooner rather than later though, don't they? Because the thing with that front group is, as I was saying on yesterday's climb stage, when there's only one rider from each team, it's in all of their interest really to press on and to make sure that they've got their advantage, because they are guaranteed every single lap that they're away that they're going to be picking up a decent chunk of points for their team. I think that the big stalling point for breaks in the future in Hammer Series races could be when there's 2 riders from one team and only 1 from all the others, or 2 riders from 2 teams and a few riders who've only got 1 per team. At that point, I don't think there's really any reason for the riders with only 1, or the teams with only 1 rider, to contribute at the front, and that could really upset the pace setting of the leading group. But given that we've got 7 strong riders and 7 riders from different teams here, it's going to be hard to catch them. But as I say that, it looks like that catch could well be made coming in towards the finish. Almost a complete copy of last lap, where we had 4 riders just staying away before the finish and then the group sprinting from behind.
That's right, so I guess we're going to get riders sprinting in the break. Trek Segafredo looking like they're going to take this one. Actually, I think that might be deceptive. I think we've still got a few hundred metres to go. 250.
Well, he's launched it, hasn't he, Matthias Brendley? He is a time trialist, and as I said before, he would struggle against the speed of some of the other riders in that group, and he knew that. So he knew that he had to go from a little bit further out. And with 50 metres to go, it looks like Trek Segafredo are going to add 20 points to their tally. Lampard coming across in third, look like Edmondson there in fourth, and indeed in fifth position, Ghana from the UAE Team Emirates squad. So soon, hopefully, we'll get an update on the points. But Trek Segafredo now should be leading the competition, which they'll be relieved about, having scored 0 points on yesterday's. Oh, Lampard almost lost it around that corner.
Let's watch for the counter-attacks then. I think, is that Sepp Van Mark who's looking like he's back in the mix now?
Well, we've got a rider from Team Sky who's trying to make his way across. I'm wondering whether that's John Dibben, the young British rider who's in his first year as a professional, or is it Viviani? Just difficult to see from the angle and the distance that we're looking down at the moment. Looks like we've got Lotto Soudal represented there as well, just about to make their way across. Of course, it's Roger Kluger in the front, not Edmondson that I was been saying before, but coming across now is, I think that is Viviani with Hoffland there from Team Lotto Soudal. So the composition of the front group has now changed. There you can see a repeat of Brendley crossing the line first, just ahead of Yves Lampard, with Roger Kluger taking third place for Orica Scott. And that goes to show you that, as we said at the start, it's not necessarily the sprinters on our paper who are going to be taking maximum points each lap. Such is the intensity of the riding that they've done so far, that a time trialist like Brendley can spring a surprise towards the end and actually stay away, because you haven't got entire teams working for a bunch sprint each time.
No, it's just fascinating to see how the tactics can be so different when it's about racing for points like that. And it is really good to see Trek Segafredo in the mix today, because as we mentioned earlier on, they are in the danger zone at the moment. They need to finish in the top 8 teams when you combine the scores from yesterday's stage and today's stage in order to be in the mix for the race win overall. So they're going to be doing their chances a whole world of good, aren't they? It looks now like we're about to see Gruppo Compacto.
Yeah. Yeah, it could well be that, but I think everyone is already once again on their limit, aren't they? Unlike yesterday where it was hilly, there will be a few more opportunities to take things slightly easier and recover, but I would love to know what the average speed has been so far for the opening couple of laps. We'll cut across to Lasty shortly and find out what you're all saying on social media, so you can leave your comments underneath the YouTube video if you're watching it there, underneath the Facebook video if you're watching it there, or if you want to do Twitter, I'll have a look at that shortly. That's at GCN Tweet. Lasty, what's everyone saying about the race today?
They're all loving it, Dan. One guy actually corrected you on one of your pronunciations of the names. Apparently you got Gregory Daniel the wrong way around.
Yeah, I did, sorry.
Evan Fulton is asking if we give him an average speed. I said we have to check in with the stats department.
Yeah,
I've not got an average speed at the moment, unfortunately, but I can tell you that currently we're doing about 45k an hour.
Very, very cool. Okay,
Thanks.
And we've got a question from Simon, who is asking if there's anything different about the bikes for this format. A bit of a techie one there.
Well, we don't know for certain, but I would suggest not. I suggest that the riders are going to be using the bikes that they're familiar with. If we see anything, there'll be a proliferation of aerodynamic bikes today. I can see Brendley's on a Trek Madon there. Dowsett is on a Canyon Aeroad. So, given how flat it is today, aerodynamics is going to be the order of the day, but nothing specialist, I wouldn't have thought.
Okay, and one last one is from Bry Harrison, who's only just joined us, so he wants to know who's really leading this race and who's winning today's Hammer Sprint stage.
Well, there we have it, the current standings.
Yeah, Trek Segafredo now with a clear lead over Quick Step Floors. Cannondale Drapac not really able to take many points the last time through. And what with that being a double points lap, Trek Segafredo almost double the points to anybody else at the moment. And almost all of our teams now, Si, have got points in the overall standings. The only team that haven't are Nippo Vinny Fantini, who did of course pick up a lot of points courtesy of Felici on yesterday's climbing stage. And so every team in the Hammer Series now has officially scored points.
Yeah, nice to see the Israel Cycling Academy team actually up there and off the start sheet. So they're now at 1.3 points, I think. So good to see. It's looking a bit cagey now. I'm imagining then this is the section directly into that relatively brisk headwind, but attacks now starting to come again.
Yeah, we've got Rompot once again on the attack, and of course this is a local race for Team Rompot. They are fully made up of Dutch riders, and in this particular Hammer Series, but it is very, very close racing. Nobody wants to see a breakaway go too far up the road without them being represented in it. And I'd love to get to chat with the riders after this, because often, of course, if you go into a few breakaways and you just slip down through the bunch, you've got loads of room to play with before you're at the end of it. If you go into the red, which pretty much every rider's going to have to do to go into breakaways today, once you get caught by the bunch, you can't drop too far back because you're going to be at the back of it.
Absolutely, yeah. Like you say, there is not much sliding space. I would imagine this is the one part of the course where you could get a little bit of a sit in the peloton. If the pace is slightly slower due to a headwind, then there's people going to be able to just recover in the wheels, but otherwise it's going to be full gas everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's also a race where if you have a couple of riders in your own team who aren't pulling their weight, they are not going to be popular guys, are they? Because you can only go so many attacks yourself. Everybody's really going into the red every time that they go on the attack, and if you don't share the workload amongst the entire 5 riders, it's going to make things very difficult. And 2 riders from Team Sky hovering towards the back, so we saw that we had onboard footage then looking at the back of the bike of young John Dibben of Team Sky, and his teammate Elio Viviani was hovering at the back as well, so that leaves him with just 3, including the non-sprinters Ian Boswell and Theo Geoghegan-Hart, to keep an eye on things at the front, and that's not going to be easy.
But wasn't Viviani looking cool again? He was looking super composed and super relaxed. I think he knows how to ride this race down, even though technically we've never had a race of this format on the road before. I'm coming back to the fact that he knows how to play it when it comes to a points race. And Caleb Ewan as well on the back too. They're obviously just trying to recover a little bit on this section whilst the group is together, and then I would imagine we're going to see some serious attacks going again very shortly.
Right, well, it's status quo after 2.5 laps of racing. Currently in the lead are Trek Segafredo with quite a commanding lead over the second place squad, which is Cannondale Drapac. They've got 28 points which they've picked up so far, but everybody now sort of collecting their thoughts and I presume collecting their energy to a degree as well before they try and launch any more attacks today. A decisive attack could go at any point. When I say decisive, you know, a group that goes up the road never to be seen again, like we saw on yesterday's climbing stage. So there's no point at which you can really relax and stay at the back without at least one of your team being vigilant and making sure that they follow the moves.
Yeah, here we go. There's a lot of fighting going on into this really sharp corner where we saw a crash earlier on. Obviously, it's quite critically important to be in the right position when the wind changes direction. Seeing some casual bunny hops there from that onboard footage. Nicely done. My man Viviani again, in fact, looking cool even whilst bunny hopping over a central reservation. Can't teach that.
Well, here we go then. Interestingly, there's a couple of riders who were named as the starting 7 for one of the teams, but haven't done either of the first 2 stages so far. And I'm thinking, firstly, of Owain Doull, who I thought would be on the start line today. I'm not sure if he's been sick or what the problem is there, or whether they're saving him just for the team time trial tomorrow. But we've also got a couple of riders from other teams who were down on the initial 7, but haven't started either of the climb stage or the sprint stage, which is interesting.
Yeah, and it'd be also interesting to know just what difference it will make for the riders that have been subbed in fresh for today. So Alex Dowsett, we know, didn't ride yesterday and has already been in the mix in that breakaway, versus a rider like Theo Geoghegan-Hart that had a really tough day out yesterday, including spending a little bit of time on the tarmac as a result of a crash. I wonder how much more he's going to be struggling.
There's confirmation there of the current standings. Trek Segafredo with the white jersey from last year as opposed to the red one that they're now using, but they lead nevertheless by 14 points, just under 12 points just under from Quick Step Floors. Cannondale Drapac there in 3rd, Orica Scott in 4th place. Mobistar, who won yesterday's race, doing pretty well considering they don't have any sprinters in the race. Just 2 laps covered so far, but getting Dowsett into that move on one of the laps out of 3 laps which carried double points was a smart move from the Spanish squad once again. If you've just joined us and if you've not watched the Hammer Series yesterday and our explanations as to what this is all about, this is very much an event that's all about the teams. The culmination of this 3 days will of course be tomorrow in what is called the Chase. The chase is essentially a team time trial pursuit where the team that's accumulated the most points in the first 2 days in the climb and the sprint will set off first. There'll then be a 30-second gap plus whatever bonus seconds you have got from the first 2 days to the second team on the road, and etc, etc. 25 seconds from then back to the third, 20 to the fourth, 15 to the fifth, and then 15 between each of the teams after that, plus the bonus seconds that each of those teams has done. So tomorrow, the best 8 teams overall will set out in the second group in the chase, and the best team will start off first, and that's why it's called the chase, because each team from then on was trying to chase the first team, and we'll see when the 4th rider from the first team crosses the line, they will be deemed the winners of the inaugural Hammer Series.
Yeah, the action is really hotting up again now. Sepp van Mark from Kendall Drapak is just on the attack, but I get the feeling... Oh, thanks, Tom. I get the feeling he's already pretty gassed because he was flicking the elbow to get a rider to come through and give him a turn really quite quickly there. So you wonder whether we might be seeing a temporary lull in the pace as riders are just trying to catch their breath. But it does look like the pace is really on, doesn't it?
Well, Trek Segafredo were one of the teams that missed out initially on that group, but I've just noticed that Jackman Zola, the Italian champion, has sprinted his way across to it, but that's a pretty big gap now between a group of 11 or 12 riders and the main peloton behind. When you've got 12 riders in the lead, that means that you've only got 68 riders left in the group behind. And if there comes a point where only 1 or 2 teams have missed the front move, if they're not on the front immediately going flat out, they might never see that group again.
No, that's the point where it could really get dangerous and could really upset the standings. It must be said, Dan, that I thought, and I still kind of think, that we may well see a complete peloton contesting even the final lap. But given how hard people are racing right now, given how tired people are going to be, and how few teammates they have to rely on, I just wonder now actually whether we're going to see a breakaway that does stick and then is going to contest the majority of the sprints.
Yeah, that's certainly something that I would envisage happening, that there is going to come a point where so many of the riders, or all of the riders that started today's sprint stage, have been into the red so many times that they are really lacking energy and their brains are starting to think, I can't carry on doing this. And at the moment at which that happens, when there's a group out the front, and in my mind, as soon as the gap extends from a strong front group to more than 30 seconds to the group behind, it could almost be game over unless they play the cat and mouse, which we're half expecting on the run up to the finish line each lap. It's going to be very hard to chase it back down.
Yeah. Now, I've been mentioning Elio Viviani quite a lot, and it has to be said, though, when I was looking at the points tally, Team Sky are a long way down, and actually there are fewer points on offer today than there were yesterday on the climb stage, by dint of the fact that there are fewer laps. And so actually they don't have too much opportunity to chill out and wait for fatigue to set in and then try and hit other teams later on. So I wonder whether they are going to need to do something quick, as in fact we're seeing another breakaway forming and without Team Sky in it.
Yeah, it looks like Tom Scully on the front, a man who had a long time spent in Great Britain riding for some of the continental teams which they have back there. With him though is a very experienced rider in his last year as a professional, Manuel Quinziato from BMC, in the red in second position right now. They've also got Sunweb, Lotto Stal and Lotto NL Jumbo represented here. And you can just see how frantic things are at the front. The flicking of the elbows. They're kind of desperate, aren't they, to get up the road. And it's not the full peloton behind either. It's starting to splinter. And already that is a significant gap.
Yeah, we're really seeing the pace on now. When you see a peloton strung out like that and then fracturing, you know that it is really tough. Because you don't normally see that, do you, on a flat road? Only in tailwinds and extreme crosswinds do you get that. So yeah, you know full well that the pace is on, and there's a lot of people here in a lot of pain.
Well, Lotto NL Jumbo refusing to work there for some reason. That was Tom Laser, who you might remember came close to winning the World Championships in Qatar last year with a late attack. Not entirely sure why he's refusing to work. I can only imagine that he's on his limit and hasn't got the ability or indeed the energy and power to contribute at the front. Maybe once he's relaxed slightly and this group has established itself, he might start to come through and off with some of the other riders.
Well, this is the difficulty there, Dan, isn't it? Because we're not far away from the finish line again, where there's more points on offer.
It comes up very quickly.
Well, that's it, and
lap.
that's why brakes are struggling to be cohesive for more than one lap. So maybe Laser's playing the right game. He's not doing turns because he knows the break is going to be ahead crossing this line, so he's just trying to save his legs for the sprint.
Yeah, well, Quick Step Floors, of course, have missed this, as have Trek Segafredo, who currently lead the standings on day 2 here in the sprint. They're quite some way behind. It does look like it's going to be these 5 riders now who are going to contest it, and it looks like the Team Sunweb riders stealing a march on the rest of the breakaway riders. He's heading off with 200 metres still to go to the line. That is a long effort, 75 metres to go in fact, and he's going to cross the line comfortably in the lead to take 10 points for Team Sunweb. Lotto NL Yumba with Laser in second place, and then the rest. But the bunch once again not far behind, led over the line by Orica Scott. That's a great example, isn't it? The second place rider across the line there from Team Sky got second place out of the bunch in the sprint, but he was more concerned with making sure that break was brought back than he was about getting those points for the team.
Absolutely, it's the trademark Daniel Lloyd sneaky attack. Everyone else is gasping for breath, but you've got a mind only to get down the road. That is the point for counterattacks, and we're seeing it lap after lap after lap, aren't we? I wonder how many people from that original breakaway that we've just seen cross the line are going to be in the mix in the next breakaway that forms.
Well, I think it will change quite considerably each and every time a breakaway is caught, because you do put a lot into it when you're up the road at those sorts of speeds, and we understand that the average speeds are up towards 50 kilometres per hour for the race so far, which is massive considering how many corners they have to deal with on the start and finish area, as you can see right now, each and every lap. And this is a good aerial view, in fact, of the Sports Zone Limburg, which is an incredible facility for not just cycling but all sorts of sports. And here is the feed zone. It's not just a feed zone for the Hammer Series, it's also a place where mechanics can stand with spare bikes and spare wheels in case the riders do have any problems. Oh, we've got a crash in a bunch. Team Sunweb down on the floor. Looks like Raymond Sinkeldam, who's taken a lot of skin off, ripped his jersey. And Caleb Ewan looks like he's on the floor as well for Orica Scott.
That's
so that's not good for them.
And Daniel Oss is down as well, looking like he's waiting for a spare bike. This doesn't look good. There's a big gap now opening up. Oof.
Well, let's hope that they're not injured too badly. But this is a good point as the doctors attend to Caleb Ewan to reiterate the fact that if you do not finish this race, then the points that you have racked up for your team do not count towards your overall standings. But Caleb Ewan, fresh out of the Giro d'Italia, or perhaps tired out of the Giro d'Italia, hitting the deck with a number of other riders just after the crossing of the line for the 3rd time. He's taken some skin off, but that doesn't look good for the young Australian. Here's the team car behind, Matt Wilson, the sports director behind the wheel, and that will be a huge blow to the chances of Orica Scott.
Yeah, this looks like game over, doesn't it, in terms of the race now for those guys. I can't imagine they're going to be able to get back to the peloton at this pace. And the crash happened really quite high up in the peloton, didn't it? Just as they were coming off the back of that corner. Didn't see exactly what caused it or who caused it, but yeah, that is a disaster. Especially a reminder that teams are smaller here than they are normally. So with only 5 riders per team, you lose one, particularly a key rider like Caleb Ewan, and suddenly you are really on the back foot. Now, Orica did fortunately score an awful lot of points yesterday, so their position in that all-important top 8 shouldn't be in doubt. But when you've got Trek Segafredo clearly on a mission today, it's not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination, is it?
No, it most certainly isn't. We've got an update from the Velon website and the Hammer Series website on the overall standings of the race as we are right now. So Trek Segafredo still in the lead, although their gap has been cut down by Cannondale Drapac. Trek Segafredo on 28.1 points, 7 points exactly clear of Cannondale Drapac. Quick Step Floors in 4th now on 17.7. Orica Scott, the home of Caleb Ewan, are currently in 4th place overall. And it's very close, in fact, between Orica Scott, Team Sunweb in 5th and Team Lotto NL Jumbo in 6th place currently. There's 1.3 points separating those 3 teams out there on the road. 3 laps covered then, Si, so we've still got 5 laps left to go. The next time they cross the finish line, they will be at the halfway point of this race. And it's once again Jasper Stuyven who is drilling things on the front. There's the man that I was mentioning earlier, Marco Canola, winner of a couple of stages of the Tour of Japan fairly recently. Good sprinter from a small group, and he's got himself into that small group now Meanwhile, it looks like Caleb Ewan might be getting himself into the ambulance.
Oh, that is not good to see, Dan. That is not good to see. He's at least walking. It looked like they were checking out his hip or his pelvis, but that's absolutely it's a disaster for Oracle Scott. And hopefully, there's not going to be any lasting damage for Ewan either.
Right, lastly, what is happening amongst the viewers?
Well, we actually had a really good question. Sorry, I just need to double check again. From Gibson Ongare, who said, "Will the unwritten rules be applied here?"
No.
Definitely not.
No, I don't think so. The unwritten rules to which he's referring to are the kind of the gentleman's code that is involved in pro racing, whereby often you may see a peloton slow down for a fallen rider or a crash. But I think this is so frenetic and fast-paced, it would take a gargantuan crash in order for the unwritten rules to kick in.
Well, that's something I noticed actually, and you alluded to it when we had a replay of Caleb Ewan's crash, Si, was that under normal circumstances, if Caleb Ewan on a flat stage had crashed, his entire team would kind of wait there on the off chance that he wasn't too badly injured and they could push him back, or at least pace him back to the bunt, and he'd still be in with a chance of a win. You can't afford to do that at the Hammer Series when it's all about the teams. You can't leave your whole team behind to just look after one rider. So they kind of looked at him on the floor and presumably thought, I hope he's all right. But they had to stick with the bunch that they were in.
Yeah.
We've also got a lot of people who are just joining the stream asking if you guys can just give a quick explainer about the format for today as well.
Yes, we can indeed. So as we come into the 4th of 8 laps on today's second stage, which is the sprint, the Hammer Series is a brand new team format which has come from the Velon Group, which is a conglomerate of some of the World Tour teams. And essentially, it is all about the team, and the finish tomorrow will be with the Chase, which is a team time trial done in a pursuit-style format. Back to that in a few moments' time. We have seen that Fernando Gaviria, for some reason, has been dropped. I'm not sure if he was distanced after the crash involving Caleb Ewan, but it doesn't look like he's going to play any further part in picking up points for his team today.
That's a disaster for Quick-Step Flawson as well, isn't it? Because he was one of those guys that we were tipping to really have the measure of today's race, given that it's such a unique format, which I suppose you should probably continue to elaborate on, Dan.
Yeah, so the first 2 days are done on circuits, as is the Chase on the last day, in fact. Day 1 was yesterday. That was called the Climb. They did 11 laps of a pretty hilly circuit around the same region where they are at now. Each time across the finish line, the top 10 riders will pick up points. On 3 laps out of the 11 yesterday, and on 3 laps out of the 8 today, double points are on offer. At the end of each stage and each day for the first 2 days, there's an accumulation of points, and if you are the winning team, you'll get 15 bonus seconds to carry through to the last day, 12 for second, 10 for third, etc., down to 10th place. The same will go for the race that you are watching today, that being the sprint stage, 99.2 kilometres in length. 8 laps, and on the 8 times across the finish line, the top 10 riders will pick up points. So at the end of the day, the top 10 teams in the classification will have gained extra bonus seconds to take off the time at which they start tomorrow. Tomorrow is the Chase, so the team that has accumulated the most points over the first 2 days will start first. They will have a minimum of 30, well, they will have a 30-second advantage over the second team off, plus any bonus seconds which they've been awarded from the first 2 days. Then, after that 30 seconds, the second team will start, minus any of the bonus seconds that they have picked up over the first 2 days. Then it's 25 seconds, then 20, then 15 between the remaining teams in the Chase tomorrow. And the first team across the line, or in fact the 4th rider from the best team, will make the winner of the race, and that team will be deemed winners of the first ever Hammer Series.
Dan, that is a cracking job of explaining things. It might sound complicated, but I think we need to put aside the intricacies, because what you need to know is that you are watching incredibly fast-paced, frenetic racing from the gun. And so rather than seeing a kind of normal formula pan out where we get a fast start and then a breakaway and then a fast finish, we are just seeing absolute anarchy on the roads, and it's just brilliant to watch. Yesterday was brilliant, and today is equally fantastic.
Yeah, and it's been extremely fast and very exciting racing once again right from the very off, and it looks like the main part of the peloton is still together as we come around this right hand bend. No doubt everybody has been into the red on a number of occasions already today. We've been 15 seconds in fact. We've got this breakaway still up the road, including Lotto Soudal, Nippo Vini Fantini, and one of the riders from Trek Segafredo, that being Jasper Stuyven. So we will get Canola now coming up towards the front. I think that's still Yeli Valais from Team Lotto Soudal. Pretty decent lead, 15 seconds, albeit from just 3 rides, and it'll be interesting to have a look further down the road there to see exactly which teams are doing the chasing behind. But Trek Segafredo, after a very disappointing day yesterday where they didn't pick up any points at all, trying to reverse that trend today, and they are currently leading the standings after 3 laps.
Yeah, this is the point in the race though, or the point on the course, should I say, where it's really, really tough for the riders because they've got quite a strong tailwind now. And so what that means is that when they are not on the front of the peloton or in the front of their group, they're not getting as much shelter, so the whole peloton moves faster, and that means it's much harder to recover. So when you make an effort, you don't get the opportunity to recover again. And so that's why I think we're going to see that group of 3, their lead will probably come down, because also tailwind means that riders are more likely to attack as well. And so this is why we're seeing every lap the lead comes down as we get towards the finish line, because this part of the course is just so fast, isn't it?
The dynamics of the group behind are almost even more interesting when it's just a group of 3 up the road, because of course when there's 3 guys up the road from different teams, that means that we've got, 13 teams behind who've missed it, and so 1 team or 2 teams aren't going to do the work for all of the rest. At which point, what we're seeing now is not a concerted chase, it's just a bunch of attacks from riders that are hoping to be able to bridge across that 19 seconds and get up towards the front. We've had another question on Twitter side from Nico and Nelly, who says, what would happen if, going into the last 500 metres of tomorrow's chase, 2 teams were side by side?
Whoa!
Sprint finish?
Oh, sprint finish on time trial bikes. That would be chaos, wouldn't it?
Do you think they'd get out the saddle on the tri-bar? Do you think they'd actually be in the bar extensions just going as hard as they could?
I think they'd need to consult a aerodynamicist, wouldn't they? So you'd have to factor in your max power seated and aerodynamic versus your max power out of the saddle and less aerodynamic. I think it'd be fascinating, actually.
We got any more questions coming on YouTube and Facebook, Lasty?
We've got a lot of questions and a lot of comments coming through. James Ambrosio is asking who the big names are in this race. So he's, again, new to the stream.
So it depends whether you're talking about the Hammer Series as a whole or today specifically, because each team gets to name 7 riders for 3 stages, but they have to pick 5 riders for each of the individual stages. We had Fernando Gaviria, who we just talked about, that we saw going out the back, recent winner of the Ciclamino jersey as points winner at the Giro d'Italia. We had Caleb Ewan in this race as well, who won a stage of the Giro d'Italia himself to add to the Vuelta a España stage win he took a couple of years ago. Greipel, the German champion from Lotto Soudal, was supposed to be taking part, but he has succumbed to a fever which he came down with a couple of nights ago. Some very big name sprinters. We've also got some other very good riders on the starting list as well, so haven't we? We've got Sepp van Mark from Team Cannondale Drapac, who's been up there in the classics for the last number of years. We've got Elia Viviani, who's of course an Olympic gold medalist from just over 1 year ago, just under 1 year ago in fact. We also got Jackman Zola, who is the Italian national champion, and a whole host of other top names here. So of course there are other riders that are preparing now for the Dauphiné Libéré, which starts tomorrow, the Tour of Switzerland, which starts next week, fatigued riders coming out of the Giro d'Italia, but the biggest draw of all came yesterday, didn't it? Tom Dumoulin, fresh off the back of winning the Giro d'Italia just a few days previous, on the start line of this race, which started 23 kilometres away from where he grew up.
Yeah, I was super impressed with Dumoulin yesterday, not only because he was in the mix, in the breakaway, it was the fact that he had he had the incentive to go for it. You would expect a rider who's just got the biggest result of his career to perhaps be a little bit on the back foot, maybe taking life easy. But no, he was there giving 100% for his team and also his fans, of which there are gazillions now across the world.
Well, we've got one rider from Quick-Step Floors who is trying to make his way up to the front group. 27 seconds though, it's going to be a difficult gap for them to chase down, 26 seconds now, but it's not in some ways, side just about catching the front group, is it?
No, you know
if
what?
you can steal a march on the rest of the group behind and pick up 4th place and get those points as you cross the line next time around, it's kind of job done from some respects.
Well, yeah, I was thinking, Dan. So there's a type of race here in the UK called the Tour Series, which is it's not exactly the same format, but it too is all about the team and not the individuals. And I remember racing it a few years back, and you would often get a situation where you'd get a small breakaway down the road, so just a couple of riders, or like here we've got 3 riders, and actually because there's so much at stake for the peloton as well, they can almost be forgotten about, and they steal a march. And I wonder whether something similar may well happen here, where they've got the biggest gap we've seen so far today.
Well, Jelle Wallace is leading things out now. Marco Canolo at the back for Nippo Vinifantini, but it should be a reasonable formality for Jasper Stuyven as they come up towards the line, but Canolo's going to push him close.
Oh, you nearly jinxed him, Dan. You nearly jinxed him.
It's another win for Trek Segafredo, so they will be increasing their lead in the classification from today. Nippo Vinifantini, though, they've shown themselves a lot, haven't they, over the last 2 days of racing, and that's great to see.
They have, yeah. They didn't have any points at all going into that stage.
3 riders from Team Sky in the top 10 as well, so although they haven't got anybody in that front trio of riders, they've still picked up quite a few points there by finishing somewhere inside the top 10 with Danny Van Poppel, Elia Viviani, and one of their other riders, John Dibben, I think that is on the front here as well. So I think Lotte Soudal probably did the best out of the teams there, because they had Moreno Hofland in that group behind as well. Jelle Wallace here at the front. We'll wait to get the graphics up on our screen fairly shortly. Just to let you know, we are not in charge of the graphics which you see on the screen. The standings are very much down to the host broadcasters, so we can't give you any more information than we see ourselves. So sorry about that.
Yeah, Dan, I was really interested to see that Stuyven carrying on and putting his head down as soon as the sprint was over. Every lap we've seen the breakaway just relax and ease back, and then we've seen a change of rider up at the front. But Stuyven there clearly sees that they've got a big old advantage, and he's put his head down. You can see him there necking an energy gel. Maybe he's in this for the long haul now. He sees that this is a great opportunity for his team to really benefit.
Right, well, we have now seen on the Hammer Series website and the Velon app that there's been an update to the overall standings. So if you'd like to see them for yourselves, you can head over to the Velon app to find them. Trek Segafredo now leading with a 15.2 point gap to Cannondale Drapac in 2nd place. Team Sky now on 3rd with 18.2 points. They came 4th across the line the previous lap. Quickstep Floors in 4th and Lotto Soudal in 5th. Team Sunweb in 6th place. But it's very, very close at the moment between 3rd and 6th place in the classification. Let's not forget they accumulate the points over the first 2 days to give you your final standing and therefore where you'll start on tomorrow's chase. But where you finish on the day is determining how many bonus seconds you'll carry into the chase tomorrow. So both of those very important indeed.
That was a pretty fast-paced sprint, wasn't it, given that they'd been off the front as a trio for the entire lap. And even more impressive that having just taken the sprint, Stuyven keeps his head down and keeps pressing on. He really is strong at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, Stuyven's not just a sprinter, is he? He's a classics rider as well. Winner of Kuurne Brussels Kuurne around about, 16 months ago now. He's a very, very strong Belgian rider in his mid-20s now, and he took that sprint relatively easily, you must say, because if he'd gone into the red there and gone really deep to try and win the sprint, you'd imagine that he wouldn't have managed to carry on pressing on after they crossed the finish line, but that is exactly what he did.
Yeah, he too was looking cool as a cucumber, in fact. That the gap is still sizable though, isn't it? There's a lot of attacks coming from the peloton there now, at least. A lot of riders trying to get a gap and then bridge across to that leading trio.
Right, there's confirmation on your screens now of the overall standings. So Trek Segafredo bouncing back from a very disappointing day on stage 1, which was the climb yesterday. They've taken a reasonably commanding lead at the halfway point of the sprint stage today. So 4 laps completed, 4 laps or just a bit under still to be done. And one notable absentee from the top 8 there was the Movistar squad. And in fact, provisionally, they are equal 12th with Bahrain, or equal 11th, should I say, with Bahrain Merida. And at that point, they wouldn't be figuring in the bonus seconds. So although they dominated yesterday's proceedings, it might well be they don't start first on tomorrow's chase.
You know, Dan, it's interesting. So I'm looking at all the data that we've got. So 32 riders are displaying their data live on the Velon app. And when I say displaying their data, so we've got their heart rates, we've got the power that they're putting through the pedals, we've also got the speed that they're doing at that particular point, and indeed how fast they're turning the pedals, so what their cadence is. And it's really interesting to see this data compared to yesterday's climbing data, because it's a whole different picture here. So the max power that we're seeing is well north of 1,000 watts. So everyone, whether they're a sprinter or indeed more of an engine like Alex Dowsett we saw, everyone has put out over 1,200 watts at least at a certain point. But the average power is much, much less. So even Daniel Oss, actually, his average power is only 200 watts. Now that doesn't tell the whole story, but certainly that's a lot lower than you might be expecting, given how tired riders are looking.
Yeah, definitely. I would expect way more than 200 watts. If you didn't see the start of our show today, Tom Dumoulin had a normalised power yesterday for over 2 hours of 398 watts, and Stefan Kung, the Swiss time trial specialist from Team BMC, had well in excess of 400 watts normalised power for over 2 hours. That was how intense and how hard the opening race was yesterday. We're starting to see huge gaps opening up on the overhead shots here now, Si.
Yeah, I've been too busy looking at my app, and I've looked up at the screen and I've seen that a race is completely different, Dan.
Yeah, 3 riders still in the lead who swept up the first 3 places at the end of the last lap. We can see behind them once again the British time trial specialist and former world hour record holder Alex Dowsett bringing another group across. Crucially, perhaps, Trek Segafredo also represented in that group with Matthias Blendley, so they'd be the only team here at the front with 2 riders represented. But it's not over yet, Si. We've got more groups coming across from behind now.
I know. Well, this brings about that point you made earlier, Dan, about whether a breakaway can function if there are 2 riders in it from the same team, because suddenly then all the other riders are likely to just sit up and say, well, you know, we're going to lose out here no matter what happens. So, in fact, we have seen that break has split already, and I wonder whether part of that was the fact that Trek had 2 riders.
Yeah, well, they're playing a blind though, aren't they, Trek Segafredo, because they've taken maximum points on at least 2 out of the first 4 finish line laps, and Matthias Blendley was one of the riders who took those maximum points on the end of the second lap, which scored double points for his team. He's now bridged across with a couple of other riders to the breakaway with his teammate Jasper Stuyven at the front, gone straight past them. And you can see though that Jelle Wallace, who was in that trio of riders where he got third the last time across the line, refusing to work. He is very much on his limit now and just trying to follow the other riders, and that is very important, Si, isn't it? That even when you're on your limit, if you see that there's a group that's come across to you and you have no teammates in there, that you at least attempt to follow any moves that go, so that you are represented, even if you don't work.
Absolutely, you've got to dig deep, haven't you? And that's brutal. That's the point at which you look back and you just think, oh no, why did no one come across with that? But you do. You have to go. Sticking his tongue out there was the part of the universal sign of I'm on my limit, lads, and please don't make me do a turn. But he did do a turn, so fair play to him.
Right, well, I think this could well come back together again fairly shortly. 43.1 kilometres to go, but more importantly than that, 4 more crossings and passings of the finish line in Limburg, where the Sports Zone Limburg is located. That's where the Hammer Series finish line is, and we've got 4 more crossings of that before the end of day 2, being the sprint. And we are all back together now. Who's got any legs left to go on the attack? It remains to be seen. Alex Dowsett now going up the road with fellow time trialist Matthias Blendley. Before we come up to the next passage of the finish line, probably a good time to head over to Lasty and see what comments you've been making out there.
Yeah, we've got a few coming through. Apparently Caleb Ewan is still transmitting speed because clearly his bike is on the roof of the team car. I think it's about time for a giveaway as well, Dan, but first up, let's just have a look through a few more comments. A lot of people are saying that it reminds them of a crit, and I'm not sure I agree with them. I think there are a few key differences, although the race is being kind of ridden in a similar flat-out manner to a crit.
Yeah, we mentioned a type of racing earlier on called kermesse racing, which is, I mean, it is almost literally just found in Belgium and the Netherlands, isn't it? Where it's really fast, really frenetic, not much in the way of teamwork, and for some reason the normal rule book just gets completely tossed out. And this reminds me very much of Kermesse racing, which is a good thing because it's a fantastic type of racing. It's super hard, everyone gets stuck in, and yeah, we just see non-stop action.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we've seen for the first, 55, 56 kilometres of racing so far. And if we look at the time now, 3:10 in the UK, 4:10 local time in the Netherlands, I think they've averaged over 50 kilometres per hour in this race so far, which is a very, very high average speed. Any of you that are out there that ride bikes, get yourself up to 50 km per hour on a downhill and just see exactly how fast that feels. It is a very high average speed. Movistar coming towards the front now with a different rider. We've seen Alex Dowsett doing a lot of work for them so far. They haven't managed to pick up anywhere near as many points as they did on yesterday's climbing stage, and they find themselves outside of the top 10. So despite dominating yesterday, Movistar could well find themselves a little bit further down the order tomorrow. Although the good thing for them was that yesterday they didn't just win the stage, they also racked up way more points than anybody else. So that gives them quite a buffer, especially as you point out, there's less points on offer overall today with 8 laps versus the 11 from yesterday.
Yeah, and it also seems like the points are being spread out a little bit more equally, aren't they? So far lower tallies being amassed in general. Now, I appreciate we've still got 41 kilometres to go, Dan, but permit me, if I may, to look forward to tomorrow. Movistar look like will comfortably be in that all-important top 8 that are going to be contesting the overall. But in terms of the other teams, Trek Segafredo playing a blinder today, which looks like they may well get in that top 8 as well. Who is going to be the stronger team, do you think, in terms of team time trial horsepower? Because that is a really, really difficult and highly specialised discipline, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And interestingly, before the race started yesterday, I had a quick look on Pro Cycling Stats. We've got all the data you could possibly need about everybody in the sport and about all the teams as well. Their list of the best teams by team time trial discipline specifically said that Lotto, NL, Jumbo were the best. And that is
really
based on the 7 riders which they had selected before. So yeah, I was quite surprised about that as well. Team Sunweb in 2nd place, although a massive part of their 2nd place presumably would be Tom Dumoulin.
Yeah.
And apparently yesterday was the only stage that he's riding, so we're not expecting to see him line up on the chase tomorrow. 3rd place, interestingly, Team Movistar. They won yesterday, so that could be an interesting thing coming into tomorrow's stage. 4th place BMC, 5th place Orica Scott. Quite low down though in 6th place Quick Step Floors, which I was surprised about. But yeah, I guess all to play for tomorrow. Incidentally, it will be done on team time trial bikes as opposed to the road bikes which they're using today.
That list, I'm just looking at it over your shoulder, Dan. I'm really surprised by that list because we've got, it must just be, like you say, down to the individual riders that teams have selected, because Team Sky, Orica Scott, they are the teams that you would normally tip to take a stage victory in a Grand Tour when it comes to a team time trial. And BMC as well, you know, are they current world champions?
Yeah, they've been world champions the last couple of years, BMC, haven't they?
Yeah, so really, really fascinating to see how that pans out. And it's not just, the team time trial is not just about pure horsepower, it's also very much about technique, isn't it? Because if you've ever ridden in a group on a bike, then you'll know that a group that is cohesive and works well together very often travels faster than a group that may have stronger riders in, but that is really disparate and all over the place. So so that's why it's, you know, someone like Movistar, where they've got, you know, more climbers in their mix, could still really perform tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. This is an interesting development in the way that the race is unfolding, Si, because this is the first time, not just today but also yesterday, where we've seen a team riding on the front, albeit with just one rider trying to keep things together on the lead into the next sprint. That team being Team Sky and that rider being the young Brit Theo Geoghegan-Hart. Presumably after they came across the line with 3 riders in around about the top 5 behind our leading trio, they've decided we've got a lot of strength in depth when it comes to the sprinters here, so if we can try and keep it together, even if we don't take the maximum points by coming across the line in first position, we're going to be able to rack up enough where we really start to rack up a huge number of points. So Team Sky, as you saw a few moments ago, currently in 3rd place in the overall classification from today's standings, and they are sacrificing Theo Geoghegan-Hart at the moment to keep things together.
Poor lad, he was out off the front yesterday, he rode his heart out, did fantastically well, and he's still being put to use today, riding on the front on a flat stage. What a legend.
And joining him now is the veteran rider from Team Lotto NL Jumbo, former German champion Robert Wagner. Second, he was just riding on the front, also trying to keep it together for some of his sprinters. They've of course got the Dutch champion Dylan Groenewegen in their ranks. They've also got Lobato, who's a great sprinter himself. Wagner, who was on the front, has also been a good sprinter in the past, but Lars Bohm is also quite punchy when it comes towards the finishes. So let's see what they can do. Interestingly, Movistar now on the front as well. I presume they thought they were trying to go in a breakaway, but at the moment, as they head towards the line for the 5th time, Si, this is pretty much all together.
This is like a full lead out. Dan, I can't quite remember off the top of my head. Have we got double points this lap?
Yeah, and in the 5th lap, it is. Very good point.
There we go then.
Double points this
so that's
time
right,
around.
we've got a full lead-out train going from Lotto Soudal. We've also got, I think that was Zach Dempster from the Israel Cycling Academy team up there in the mix as well. Team Sky have just lost out. Theo Gegenhardt is not on the front anymore. But this is a fast sprint, this one, isn't it?
Oh, it's very, very close. It's the first time we've seen a sprint of this kind, despite the fact that this is the sprint day. It's not been quite as chaotic as this so far, has it? As we've seen a clear group of riders coming towards the finish line. Looks to me like it is Lobato on the front right now, but 2 riders from Team Sunweb just coming through as we come towards the line. They could be taking 1st and 2nd. Nizzolo coming towards the line. In fact, there was a full leader. He sat up.
This is absolutely fascinating. They must be nailed. It looks like Team Sky take the win on that particular lap, with Team Sunweb in 2nd.
Yeah.
Viviani, there we go. That was why.
Yeah, Viviani takes the maximum 20 points. Team Sunweb with Valscheit in 2nd place, I think, as they cross the line. The only team from the overhead shot who I could spot with more than one rider was Lotto Soudal, with Moreno Hofland and Marcel Sibo, but they were a little bit further down the order, and I don't think even between them they would have accumulated as much points as Elia Viviani did for Team Sky. So we will get the results of that up for you as soon as we possibly can. In fact, they are already up on the app, so we've got a new standings overall, which we will read out to you just in a few moments' time.
Yeah, the counter-attacks on the Dan Lloyd sneaky move are already going, but I get the feeling, Dan, that those guys are gassed because they've already sat up. Even though they had a gap, we had Nizzolo there in the move, and they're all back together. And also that sprint as well was really messy, wasn't it? A lot of riders within sight of the line were still pulling over and sitting up when they had everything to gain from keeping their heads down and pedalling on towards the line, because it's so important to get in those points.
Yeah, there's a point where I thought Team Sunweb were going to be 1st and 2nd.
Yeah.
They were slightly further out from the finish line than I had thought, but he did sit up. I'm not going to take too much away from him because he probably went very deep into the red to lead out his teammate here, Valscheit, for 2nd place. But that leaves us now with Trek Segafredo, who picks up way more points there, with Nizzolo coming across the line in 3rd. They're on 58.2 points, 20 points exactly clear of Team Sky, who've launched themselves up to 2nd. So Team Sky, courtesy of their result yesterday, where they were 3rd place overall, 2nd overall for them today. Could they be the first team off in the chase tomorrow?
Well, that is an interesting thought, isn't it? And we did wonder whether or not the experience of Viviani in this kind of event, where you accumulate points as opposed to just winning the final sprint, would play into their advantage. And he did look like he played an absolute blinder in that sprint, didn't he?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult though for Sky, isn't it? There are double points, of course, for the last crossing of the finish line in 36.2 kilometres time. If we look at the deficit of 3rd place yesterday, Team Sky to the Movistar squad, it was 60 points, and just a little over that. At the moment they sit on 38.2 whilst Movistar are on 10.9, so it's only around about 30 points, so they've not even halved that deficit with more than half of today's racing done, so it's going to be difficult for them to overtake the Spanish squad. We have got another question coming in asking whether get to that in a few moments' time. Here's current standings for you on the screen. Trek Segafredo with a 20-point lead exactly over Team Sky and 25 points over Lotto Soudal. Team Sunweb in 4th place on 32.5, and then a pretty big gap back to Cannondale Drapac in 4th. Bahrain Merida, another team that didn't score any points yesterday, currently in 5th place. Israel Cycling Academy currently last, and they didn't score any points yesterday, so they're pretty sure to be starting in Group 2 tomorrow, which won't be able to contend for the overall win, even if they can contend for the stage. The question coming in, would Cav have done well in this kind of format of racing?
Well, you wonder whether he would have done. I suspect Cav would be almost the perfect rider for this type of event as well. Another rider with huge experience in points type races, whether it be the points race itself or the Madison. And obviously one of the world's best sprinters as well. We were talking before we came on air about Dimension Data, Mark Cavendish's team, not being in this event. And I wonder whether, given the success of this, whether they'll be looking to be in the next one.
Yeah, well, you'd imagine that they'd be watching at home. I'm sure there's a few riders at home who, even if they weren't particularly enamoured initially with the idea of doing it, were thinking, I wonder how I would get on in a race like this. I mean, it's such frantic and exciting racing right from the very beginning that you can't possibly know how you get on until you gave it a try. We've also been asked what kind of equipment that the teams will be using on today's race. Most of the teams these days do have the choice of an aero bike and a lighter climbing bike, so presumably if you do have that option, you would have used the latter yesterday for the climbing stage, and today would be all about being as aero as possible. Yeah,
although we're just looking at quick step floors now, really trying to make a difference and make a break. Both of those guys are on the lightweight bike, the tarmac bike, by the look of it, and so that's quite interesting. They've just gone presumably for the bike they feel most comfortable on, as opposed to the one that on paper should be the fastest option.
Also of note will be the differences in nutrition for the riders for stages that we've got in the Hammer Series versus what you might see them consume over the course of a Grand Tour, because of course yesterday being just over 2 hours, today looks like it's going to be 2 hours as well. You'd pretty much be able to get away with having quite a few bottles with some energy drink and maybe 1 or 2 gels. You're not going to need to stock up on rice cakes and energy bars and what we normally see them use during the Grand Tour stages.
No, that's right. They'll be not consuming all that many calories really, but they can't feed from their team cars. Whereas in a normal road stage, you would get riders from within a team dropping back to the team car and bringing a whole load of bottles up, supplying the whole team. They're not allowed to do that in this race, nor would they have time to, frankly. But so that's why we're seeing riders very skillfully, I might add, catching bottles at over 50-odd kilometres an hour.
Yeah, well, incidentally, if you'd like to know how to skillfully catch bottles, we at GCN did a video on how to give and take a musette or a bidon just a couple of months ago. So
I was glad it was you and Matt doing that one, because I am terrible at catching bottles at the side of the road. I used to really suck at that.
Here's a quick recap as to what's happened over the last couple of stages. If you've just joined us, Orica Scott here in the car with Matt Wilson, their sports director. Bad news for them, as Caleb Ewan had to exit the race. Which reminds me, we had another question in, once again asking whether a rider who crashes out and doesn't finish, whether their points will still remain intact for the team at the end of the day. The answer is no. You've got to get at least into the last lap for your points to count towards your team's tally. So that is a big blow to Orica Scott.
The attacks just keep on coming, don't they, Dan? This peloton must be just dying for the race to finish, because they are still just relentless into this really strong headwind section. No one's able to make the difference at the moment, but as they come into this corner up here, this is the point at which they change direction clearly, the wind changes, and that we're going to be seeing a few more attacks that I would imagine will at least stick this time.
Just looking at Zach Dempster, who is bringing up the rear of the peloton at the moment. This looks like Jens de Bousseré, the rider and former Belgian champion from Lotto Soudal, who, as I said, recently won a stage of the Belgian Tour, which finished at the end of last week. So not much rest for him before he came into the Hammer Series. We haven't seen too much of this rider so far in the race today. We've seen plenty of Seberg trying to make his breakaways after the crossing to the finish line. We've also seen Hofland picking up some points for the Belgian squad. You wonder whether any of the teams had a tactic whereby they left one rider not doing anything for the opening one half, or maybe just over that, of the race, and still had plenty of energy to go with the moves towards the end when everybody else is still very fatigued.
Well, it does look like it, doesn't it? Because as well as de Bousquet, there's an awful lot of riders that you would imagine as being, you know, perfect for this type of event that we haven't really seen yet today. So yeah, I wonder whether we're going to see some fresh legs and some new faces come to the fore.
Right, well, before we get into the crunch point of the race, I know that there are a lot of people just tuning into the coverage for the first time. We're going to explain the rules fairly shortly. There's some confirmation of the overall standings. Trek Segafredo with 58.2 points, 20 clear of Sky, 25 clear of Lotus Soudal, Sunweb in 4th on 32.5, 5th place the Cannondale Drapac squad, who you can see up there once again with Sepp van Mark trying to get away. In fact, there is a group of around about 12, maybe even a bigger group than that, of around 15 riders trying to break clear at the moment, with Matthias Brendele of Trek Segafredo on the front, and they've got a pretty clear gap between themselves and the group behind. Let's explain one last time, Si, before we come into the final part of the race, what this new Hammer Series format is all about. This is a brand new concept in the world of professional cycling, which is aimed completely at the team's results as opposed to individual riders. So we have 5-man teams on each of the 3 days, which are chosen from an initial 7-man squad. They can interchange the riders on each day. Yesterday was the climb. So we had 11 laps of an 8-kilometre circuit with points available at the end of each lap and double points available on 3. At the end of that, we had Movistar winning the event on 144.8 points, with Team Sunweb in second. But what that gave the teams was a 15-second bonus for winning, 12 seconds for second place, 10 seconds for third, etc. The same format happens today, this being the sprint stage on a much flatter circuit. Only 8 laps on today's race. But again, whichever team wins today's stage will have 15 seconds of bonuses to take into the chase tomorrow. The accumulated points from the first 2 stages will give the rankings of the team, and it is in that order that they will set out from tomorrow. So if Movistar manage to cling on to the lead, they will set out first on the chase tomorrow, which is a team time trial of 5 riders. 30 seconds later, plus or minus any bonus seconds which either of those teams have taken over the first 2 stages, the next team will start, and they will be chasing down the leaders on the road. Then it's a 25-second base gap to the next team, plus or minus bonus seconds, then 20, then 15 seconds between the remaining teams in that front group of 8. And whoever crosses the line first with their 4th rider will win the race overall.
Good explanation once again, Dan. That was cracking. Whilst you've been doing that, there's been quite a significant split in the peloton here. We've got a big old group up front now.
Right, I think it's time to give away, Si, some GCN swag. Whilst we get a look down at some of the riders who've made it into this group, including Alex Dowsett, our man in the corner, statistician Tom Last, is going to give us some information and some questions from the audience that are watching back at home, and also tell them how they can win this GCN swag.
Yeah, certainly. So, well, I think Si's the statistician today, actually, Dan, but we've got a lot of questions about where Matt is. Most people are saying that it's because he hasn't clipped in yet, which seems a little bit unfair, and people are still saying that. We had a really good one from Ernie E, who was asking if there are any race radios in this one.
Yes, we have got race radios for the riders, which is pretty crucial, I think, on today's or this Hammer Series, because things change so quickly that in order to get a handle on what's happening, you need communication between the sports directors in the cars and the riders on the road. And I would personally say that the information coming from the riders on the road in this situation would be just as important as the directions from the teams behind, because they are the ones that are seeing whether they're represented or not in the lead group, and if so, whether there's any teams with more than one rider, or indeed if they've got more than one rider in the group.
Yeah, do you think they actually have enough breath left to relay messages to their directors at the moment?
I'd imagine so.
Yeah, according to the stats, mate, there's quite a lot of guys who are not in the red. Let's put it that way. So, so like we mentioned earlier, the average power that riders are doing isn't eye-watering like it was yesterday. That doesn't mean that it's not difficult. It certainly is, but also the heart rates as well. We're seeing some riders that are a little bit more composed than they were yesterday.
Okay, I think we should give away a couple of GCN musettes, also available in the GCN shop. We've got a black musette, and Dan has a red one. Dan, over to you. You can decide how the winners can win this one.
Oh, wow. Well, have we got a photo to put up for a caption, or are we lacking on that front at the moment. Shortly on your screens, before we get through to the next finish lap, we will
there we
put
go.
a photo up. There it is right
Another
now.
bottle-related one.
Yeah, so give us your best captions for the photo, which you see on your screens right now, and the best one, which lastly will choose after they cross the finish line the next time around, will win a musette, which will come complete inside with a GCN cap and also a GCN phone case. So get your captions in either underneath the video that you are watching on YouTube or underneath the video that you are watching currently on Facebook.
Yeah, and as a tip, anyone involving hammer time is probably going to do quite well in that one. So yeah, get your captions coming in. This race is looking different once again this lap.
Yeah, well, we've got Roger Kluger now, who was a part of that big group which you can see in the distance of around about 15 or 20 riders. This looks like it could be kind of crunch point, doesn't it? Because that's a massive gap between the group that's in the background of shot now and the main peloton left behind. There's John Dibben from Team Sky. He's a part of the group which has formed at the front, as is fellow Brit Alex Dowsett. This is a look actually behind John Dibben at the moment. We've got the onboard footage from the GoPro cameras, and incidentally, that's Carlos Betancourt.
Yeah, Betancourt's made it into the front split. That's well, it's a cracking effort from him, isn't it, really? Given yesterday and given the fact that he's not renowned as being a man for the flatlands, that's good work.
Well, Movistar have managed to get 2 into this group of around about 20 riders. It looks like Roger Kluger, the German rider from Orica Scott, is going to take the maximum 10 points across the line this time around. But Movistar, who have lost out a little bit today so far, will be glad to have 2 guys representing them in that front group, because it does look
gap now.
like that could be the group that we were talking about that has gone clear and won't be seen again.
Yeah, there's enough riders from the same teams that will really want to see this one stick. I can't see who's missed the split off the top of my head, but we're going to get the... here we go, Kluger. Looks like he is going to take this one.
Yeah, Kluger with a clear advantage as he just comes past 100 metres to go. He's got just enough of a gap in order to be able to relax ever slightly. Looks like Viviani and John Dibben both up there for Team Sky, but we also had one of the riders from Lotto Soudal. So I think that Team Sky will be closing the gap now on Trek Segafredo, because we saw a few moments ago, oh, in fact, they've got Nizzolo. Of course, it's very difficult to see Nizzolo when you're quickly looking down and see who's represented from the teams. Predominantly in green, going through your screen right now, the Italian national champion. So they had both he and one other rider from Trek Segafredo. And we'll get confirmation fairly shortly as to what the overall standings look like. Here's a repeat from the overhead shot. You can see Viviani going very quickly on the left-hand side of the screen, but overtaken on the line by, I think, probably Debustere from Team Lotto Soudal.
Here we go. Oh, there's Kluger. What's going to be over the line? Who can we see first? Oof, that was close. I think Viviani, for my money, was the one that took that from Debustere. And I think Nizzolo was potentially even out of the points on that lap. God, it's a different ballgame entirely when you get a bunch coming across the line, isn't it? I mean, it really is frenetic, sprinting for 8th place.
Yeah. Well, Trek Segafredo is still in the lead in the overall classification. If you'd like to keep up to date yourselves on what is happening from a team's perspective, which is what this Hammer Series is all about, head over to the Velon app or indeed the Hammer Series website, and you'll be able to see live updates as you go along. But Trek Segafredo's gap now to 2nd place Team Sky, down to 10.1 points. Lotto Soudal have moved themselves up to 3rd, which means Team Sunweb are down to 4th on the day. Orica Scott now some way back at 5th place, then Cannondale Dropout, then Team Lotto NL Jumbo. Movistar incidentally have managed to claw themselves up to 10th place in the overall classification for today, so from that point of view they will pick up an extra bonus second. I do think that they did enough yesterday, Movistar, to possibly win overall over the first 2 races and therefore give themselves the 1st place start on tomorrow's chase from the elite group.
The composition of this break's really interesting, Dan. A lot of teams with 2. So Cannondale Drapac have got 2, Sky have got 2 riders, Movistar have got 2 riders, Quickstep Floor have got 2 riders. It seems like Sunweb are one of the big losers. They've just got 1 rider in there, as have Roompot. But I can't quite believe that the riders are still attacking from that front group. So the group is almost too big. It's unwieldy, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they're not satisfied, are they, with the fact that... I mean, that's the other thing, you know. When you're in a break, let's say in a stage of the Tour de France, if you're going up the road in the first half of the stage and the composition of the group is like this, if it looks like it's going to come down to a sprint, you'd still work with the sprinters in the group, wouldn't you? Because you've got a chance later on the stage, maybe on a small climb, to go on the attack and get rid of the sprinters, or perhaps just surprise them with a late attack in the last few kilometres of the race. However, if you get yourself in a group in the Hammer Series here, you look around you, there's a bunch of very fast sprinters. You don't want to be staying with them because there's points available on each and every lap. The last lap, of course, does hold double points once again, but you don't want to be sticking in the group and just allowing them to scoop up all the points whilst you languish in 9th or 10th place.
Absolutely. It'd be really interesting to see what's going on in the, I don't know if it's called the peloton or the last group on the road, because the numbers actually are not too dissimilar between the peloton and the first group. But there's a lot of looking around and messing around in this front group, so I wonder whether the gap could well close again and we'll just see the whole bunch back together again in this lap.
Well, it's like two of the protagonists from yesterday's stage who've just gone on the attack from that leading group. I think that's the young French rider Remy Cavagna from Team Quickstep Floors. He's been joined by the Swiss time trial specialist Stefan Kung, who incidentally, if you have just joined us, averaged a monstrous 400 watts for 2 hours yesterday with a normalised power well in excess of that. Quite stupendous figures that he put out on yesterday's climb stage. But yeah, that front group side very much fracturing here at the moment.
Yeah, I just think this gives an indication of how tired riders are by the fact that they're struggling to bridge gaps and the fact that these gaps are indeed opening. Going back to Stefan Kung, I'm pleased to see he's wearing socks, because when Matt and I caught up with him at the Giro d'Italia last year, he rode without socks. I still keeps me awake at night sometimes thinking about that.
Well, I think that stems from Team GB in the team pursuit on the run-up to the Rio Olympic Games. Spending most of their times in the World Cups and the World Championships doing the team pursuit with no socks on. Owain Doull let slip after the Olympics that that was just mind games with the other teams. So once it came to the Olympics, lots of the other teams going without socks. Team GB going with some aerodynamic under socks.
Well, Kung did later tweet to say that he regretted going without socks because it was a wet it was a wet stage and his shoes filled up with water and his feet didn't feel so nice. But anyway, there we go. That was a lesson learned perhaps that day.
Right, Lasty wants to get a word in edgeways between us, so let's see what he's got to say.
You're channeling that no socks look as well today, Si.
Yeah, that's off camera, mate. No one can see that.
Okay, I think the winner is, for the caption, is going to have to be the first person who put forward one of the Hammer Time themed ones.
Go on then.
It's Mark Orrit who said you can't touch this.
Ah!
It's okay, it wasn't Stop Hammer Time, so you won it just on that basis, really.
Yeah. No, to be fair, given the photograph, I think that's spot on. Nice work.
Yeah, well done.
Good tweet in from Tim Johnson as well, Dan, saying that he's a fan because it's good for former racers to be thankful they're not doing it. I guess you can side with that.
Well, Tim Johnson would have loved to race up today, wouldn't he? A former legend of cyclocross. Well, not former, current legend of cyclocross. Not still racing, but he's still a legend of cyclocross over in the US. He'd love this style of racing. We were chatting yesterday about which riders might dominate the Hammer Series in future years, and we both thought of the two incredible prospects in cyclocross at the moment, Mathieu van der Poel being one of those. Those guys would love this sort of racing, wouldn't they? Because it's just full on, albeit for double the time of a normal cyclocross race, but 2 hours flat out, they'd be well at home with that, wouldn't they?
Well, they would, but I wonder whether today's stage is very different to yesterday's climb stage. So the climb stage, 100%, I'm with you on cyclocross riders and also mountain bikers. We mentioned Nino Schurter, who's the Olympic champ. But this stage, is one for the track riders. I think it's a completely different ball game. And although a cyclocross rider could be in the mix here, I think the average speed here, over 50 kilometres an hour, that's perfect, tailor-made for riders that are all about fast pace, and that's track riders for me, through and through.
Well, we've got Elia Viviani up here in the front group as one of the two riders representing Team Sky at the head of affairs right now, or are they down to just one?
I think they're down to just one.
Wow, that front group has really split up now, hasn't it, as we went through our caption competition. 3 riders now languishing off the back, including Lampard, from Team Quickstep Floors. Number 107 there is Boy Van Poppel riding for the Trek Segafredo squad, and De Boucheray, that's a big loss for Lotto Soudal if he doesn't manage to get himself back into the group before they get to the next time through. It's a 12.4 kilometre lap which they're covering 8 times today, so they've got 6.1 k's now before the next sprint across the finish line. Then the final sprint of the day and the finish line proper once again carries double points.
Dan, that was remarkably good arithmetic on the fly. I'm genuinely impressed. There's no sign of a calculator or anything there. Good work. I think the fact that there's just 2 more passages of that finish line, including the finish itself, so there's not many points up for grabs left. So these guys are really looking to make it count now, where they can.
Yeah, so we've got Stefan Kung, who was so at the head of affairs on yesterday's climbing stage. We've also got who we think is Remy Cavagna. Excuse us for not recognising him immediately. He's a fairly new rider to the scene, neo-pro, so first year as a professional rider. There's the current standings on your screen now. 10.1 points is the gap between Trek Segafredo and Team Sky, with Lotto Soudal in third place. Trek Segafredo have of course got the man on the right hand side of your screens now, Jackman Zola, who has had a fairly steady start to the season after not being able to race for 6 months due to injury. 5 riders now here at the back, including Tom van Asbroek of Team Cannondale Drapac. Just the body language side tells you that although this hasn't been hilly today, it has still been incredibly hard.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the power files, if you'll forgive me for being a bit geeky about this, at the end of today, because I suspect average power and maximum power isn't going to tell us the whole story. I imagine that riders will have been putting in some huge 20-second, 30-second, 1-minute powers. So the kind of intensity that really takes it out of you. You only have a limited number of those kind of efforts in you before it's game over, and I think that's what we're seeing here, isn't it?
Yeah, I think burning matches is the term, isn't it? We've all got a certain number of matches to burn when we're out on a ride or when we're in a race. You can do multiple efforts, but at some point you've got nothing left to give on a flat stage like today. So, calculating your effort and trying to use others' energy in front of you by not going on the attack into the wind yourself could be crucial on a race like today, which is day 2 of the Hammer Series, this being the sprint. 2 Cannondale Drapac riders now towards the back. We've got Tom van Asbroek and Sepp van Mark. We've got a couple of team riders from Trek Segafredo with Nitzolo, and we think that the other one is Boy Van Poppel at the front of affairs. Interesting though to see the presence of Carlos Betancourt.
Well, let's talk about Betancourt, shall we? Because he was there in that front split just a minute ago. He said yesterday after his stage win that he's been training super hard up at altitude, which would explain why he did so well yesterday. He's naturally a fantastic punchy climber, clearly in great shape, but you don't always assume that kind of level of conditioning for climbing translates onto a flat stage like today, but clearly he is just flying.
Well, perhaps even more of a sign of his form than yesterday in some respects, that he's managed to get himself into this group. What do you think Betancourt's chances are of a podium at the Tour de France side?
Well, I don't know.
I couldn't help but notice yesterday evening that he's 500 to 1 for the Tour de France.
My answer was going to be, I'd suggest he's probably about 500 to 1 to win the Tour de France. But I mean, his problem, I suppose, is the fact that his illustrious teammate and countryman Nairo Quintana is also in the Movistar squad.
As well as Valverde.
Exactly. So, Valverde...
But he could sneak off then.
Well, he could sneak off, yeah. Maybe he'll just, be under the radar. He would have been until you said that he was a strong outside bet. No, I think he'll be a fantastic lieutenant for Quintana, but I can't see him being given the freedom to do his own thing.
This is... Looking down at the coverage that we're getting at the moment, this is another different scenario and situation to what we would find under normal circumstances at a professional race. A counter-attack going from what is left of the main group behind, but they're all working together, because unlike a normal race where if you've got riders at the front who are more than capable of taking the victory, it's not about the individual riders here, it's about the team victory at the end of each day. So if you can get another rider into that front move and therefore have 3 as opposed to 2, that's going to be beneficial to you. It doesn't matter if you bring up a couple of other riders with you.
No, Dan, I'm not going to lie, I'm absolutely loving it. It's just brilliant to see, and because it's new, it's even more fascinating. But if I'm honest, when I watch bike racing, what I like to see are riders going 100%, and I like seeing people when they're tired. And even though this stage is 99 kilometres long, they are tired already, aren't they?
Yeah, well, it's a 12.4 kilometre lap which they are riding around today, which is relatively flat. So it's only got 2.2 k's now until they will get to the finish lap, or finish line, should I say, for the penultimate time. And at the moment, with the way things stand, it looks like these two riders will be taking the maximum points at the end of this lap. They being, of course, Sepp van Mark in the lime green of Cannondale Drapac and Marco Canola there, as you can see on your screen right now, the Italian riding for Nippo Vini Fantini, who of all of the invited teams have really shown themselves very well, haven't they?
They have indeed, actually. Yeah, they had a fantastic performance yesterday with Veloci, and then here they are today. Canola's been brilliant, and also really good to see Van Mark as well, given that he did have the ignominy yesterday of pulling out after just 3 kilometres, totally taken by surprise by the pace and the ferocity of the start of yesterday's event. And here he is today on his natural habitat, you'd have thought, and really, really riding strongly.
Incidentally, did you see what happened to Alex Dowsett? Because he was in that front group, wasn't he, with his teammate Carlos Betancourt at a point.
And he's not there anymore?
I couldn't see him just on that last shot.
It did split a lot, didn't it, on that the initial headwind section of the lap, so potentially I suppose he missed another split. That's the frustrating thing, isn't it, when you're racing? There are times where you make what you think is the front split and you kind of relax just for one moment before it all kicks off again, and then you find that you're one of two guys that hasn't made the front split and you get dropped, and maybe that's exactly what's happened.
Well, it looks like those two riders, in my mind, are going to take first and second across the line for the penultimate finish line lap. There, as you can see, is a number 94 from Team Sunweb, that being the experienced lead-out man, Albert Timmer. And that's the other dynamic, isn't it, that normally Albert Timmer wouldn't be focused on his own ambitions at all, and to some extent he's not focused on his own ambitions here, but he knows that getting the points across the line in even third place is going to benefit his team a lot more than waiting around for one of his sprinters and leading them out at the end of each lap. There, as you were just pointing out to me, Si, is Alex Dowsett just coming back onto this group, along with John Dibben there of Team Sky and one of the Caja Rural riders, number 125, that being Jonathan Lastra. They've also done pretty well so far today, the second division outfit from Spain.
Here we go then, coming up to just a few hundred metres to the line. It's a single points lap, so 10 points at stake. Both of these teams need the points, particularly I would say Cannondale Drapac. So the pressure's on Van Mark a little bit here to get the better of Canola, but who would your money be on, Dan?
I'm not sure. I think it's going to be a very close sprint actually between those first two riders. Sepp van Mark, of course, beating Tom Bonin to sprint to the victory at Omloop Nieuwsblad many years ago. But Canola, as I said, coming off the back of a few victories, a couple of victories in stages of the Tour of Japan just a week or so ago. So he's obviously got a punch at the end as well. Here they go then. Canola's leading out. Sepp van Mark giving it absolutely everything he's got. Can he come across it? No. Canola's got enough to beat the Belgian into second place. So it's Nippo Vini Fantini first across the line for the penultimate time of the day. Cannondale in second, and they're pressing on. He's saying, let's keep going.
Yeah, very interesting. So they've got quite a gap now, haven't they? I suspect this is due to fatigue from behind, as well as a little bit of cat and mouse, because Van Mark obviously has another teammate in there to police things. But yeah, they could well be contesting then the final sprint with double points on offer.
Well, third across the line was Albert Timmer on his own, representing Team Sunweb. It looked like Nizzolo, the Italian champion from Trek Segafredo, best of the rest behind, taking a fourth place for them. And we're just about now to get an update on the situation out there on the road. So with 7 of the 8 laps done, Trek Segafredo have now got a 14.1 point lead over Team Sky in second place. Lottis is down in third on 44.1. Then it's Sunweb, then it's Cannondale Drapac. Currently though, Movistar, who won yesterday, despite having 2 riders in that lead group, none of them sprinters, they're down in 11th place, so they won't be picking up any bonus seconds today.
Dan, could you ever conceive of a road race of 99 kilometres long on the flat that would be detonated quite as much as this?
No.
It's hard to, isn't it?
No, because there's no reason, unless there's crosswinds right from the beginning, there's no reason for any team to go absolutely balls out from the start, is there?
No, not at all. This is just fascinating. I'm wondering now what this chase group's going to do. There's obviously a few riders really motivated to bridge that gap up to Van Mark and Canola. But are they going to be able to? This is the point at which it really does get very tactical, doesn't it? And there's still a lot of points on offer, with a lot of teams desperately in need of them to make that final top 8 to contest the overall victory tomorrow.
I honestly think that, pro bike riders are very good at keeping a poker face, aren't they? So even when they're on their limit, it doesn't look like they're anywhere close to it. But given that a lot of riders do look like they're close to their limit, that goes to show you that they're probably on it.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. And the fact that these gaps are opening up suggests that they are really fatigued. So 99 kilometres of racing, when you're sprinting every 12 kilometres or so, clearly takes it out of you, as if we didn't know already.
Well, there's a quick replay of the sprint towards the penultimate crossing of the finish line. Canola in the end with a reasonably comfortable victory for Team Nippo Vini Fantini over Cannondale Drapac with Sepp Van Mark. But it was telling, Si, wasn't it? As Van Mark looked behind him when he knew that he wasn't going to take the maximum points over that lap, having a quick glance over his shoulder to see what the gap was between him and that group over the next people on the road. And immediately after realising it was still a significant gap, just saying to Canola, look, let's carry on with this because we've got a decent lead. We can take the first 2 placings between us the next time across the line too. We also had a question much earlier on through today's broadcast about whether or not riders would be crossing the finish line with their arms aloft each and every lap. We've seen that they're not, which is quite understandable because there's still a lot of racing to be done after each and every lap. Yesterday we saw Betancourt raising his arms aloft at the finish when he crossed the line first, but he also knew that his team had won the race.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. If these two guys stay away, neither of them have played quite a big enough part in the race like Betancourt did yesterday to kind of deserve to put their arms in the air. But equally, it's the end of a bike race, Dan. You kind of got to put your arms in the air, haven't you? You've got to salute the crowd, you've got to get the pictures. The pictures of Betancourt winning yesterday's stage were the lead photos for every headline, and they've got to bear that in mind, haven't they? Good advert for the team.
Yeah, well, we've still got the 2 riders leading at the front. Just trying to look on the app at the moment to see what the gap is to the next group on the road. But these two both 100% committed, but there's quite a lot of chit-chat going on between the 2 of them at the moment. I think just probably just deciding between them both, we need to keep pressing on now, because if we keep pressing on at this point, we're never going to be seen again, and then we can just dispute the final sprint, which, let's remind you, does have double points available when they cross the line for the last time. So once they get to the finish line in 9.2 kilometres time, it will be 20 points on offer for whoever comes across the line first, and then 16.2 points for the second rider across the line, etc, etc.
That's quite a big gap now, and the aerial shot
is
pulling back there, isn't it? They've got a monster lead, and you'd struggle to see anyone catching them back up, but with attacks going from that chasing group, they're giving it everything to close it down. I was just looking at the overall standings, Dan, and I'm wondering whether Sepp Van Mark has got a lot of pressure on his shoulders here, because Cannondale Drapac started today 10th overall, and with only 2.3 points to their credit. To get in the top 8, which they need to be in order to be fighting out for the overall victory, they needed 27.7. The fact they've only got 33 or so now means that although technically they've made it, it's not close. It's not comfortable by any stretch of the imagination, because obviously all the other teams have scored points as well.
Yeah, well, there's going to be 2 classifications that you'll see on your screen at the end of today's sprint race. Firstly, we'll see the classification of today's race, the sprint race, and see who's taken the 15 seconds of bonuses. It looks like it's going to be Trek Segafredo as things stand at the moment, and I don't see that changing personally. So they should take 15 bonus seconds into the time trial tomorrow. Let's not forget they didn't pick up any yesterday, or indeed any points, Trek Segafredo. But then we're going to see an overall classification as well, and it's that overall classification, the accumulation of the points from today as well as yesterday's climbing stage, which will give us our start order for tomorrow's chase, which is a team time trial pursuit in effect. So the amount of points that you've accumulated, the team with the most points will start off first, and then there's a group A and a group B. So the group A is consisting of the first 8 teams in the overall classification, accumulating points in the first 2 stages. Those are the only teams who are in with a chance of winning this inaugural Hammer Series race.
I tell you what, Dan, we've talked about the fatigue clearly in the legs of the peloton now, but looking at Canola and Van Mark, not on our screens anymore, but they've just been there, they're both looking very good, and they're clearly flying.
Well, they've got the advantage, Si, haven't they, that they can kind of settle into a fairly uncomfortable rhythm, but a rhythm all the same, whereas the problem for everybody so far in this race today has been there's been no kind of rhythm from the start to the finish. It's basically been constant attacks. There's been a few occasions where we've had a breakaway for half a lap or maybe even a whole lap where it's been slightly more steady in terms of the speed and the attacks. But on the whole, riders have had to continually accelerate, continue to go after attacks, continue to make attacks or chase them down. Right, well, we're getting information through on race radio that Movistar have got an unassailable lead now overall in the competition. So they will officially be starting tomorrow's chase race in the first position, plus whatever bonus seconds they have achieved. It looks, with the way things are at the moment, like they might be getting just 15 bonus seconds tomorrow, because I don't think they're going to be inside the top 10 today. So conceivably, let's not forget that the base difference between the first and the second teams tomorrow is 30 seconds. It could be that the team in second place actually, despite not having accumulated as many points, might have accumulated more bonus seconds. So the gap between Movistar and the second team off tomorrow might be less than 30 seconds.
Good deductions, Dan. That is some serious intrigue going into tomorrow, isn't it? I think Movistar should be congratulating Betancourt even more on his performance for yesterday. Perhaps he gets extra helpings of dessert tonight, because that is fantastic, really, to win it already, even or to be leading rather overall even before today's race is finished.
Yeah, well, it was all basically down to him yesterday. They had a lot of help, of course, from Soler and Nelson Oliveira behind, picking up the minor points and the minor places. But basically, it was Betancourt. How many laps did he win yesterday? I didn't go back and look, but it must have been at least 4 or 5 out of the 11.
I think I remember reading 5 or so, and obviously getting double points on that last lap as well. He really did put in a fantastic performance, didn't he? It looks like the impetus has gone out of this chase group just a fraction now, doesn't it? I wonder whether they're thinking, right, okay, well, we're fighting for 4th place now, but with double points on offer, there's still a lot to play for.
Yeah, Ivan Garcia here from Bahrain Merida. Not a great start to the weekend for them, was it, after they had a number of their bikes stolen?
No.
In fact, 9 of their time trial bikes stolen from the team truck and 1 of their road race bikes. So we understand, unless that they've been returned since then, that tomorrow they're having to do the chase on their normal road bikes, which is going to be a huge disadvantage for them. Nevertheless, they will be starting in the second group, so actually they have a chance tomorrow of racing for overall victory at this inaugural Hammer Series. But still, good to see them trying to head up the road here with that number 3 Garcia. But I think you're right, Si. I think it's kind of over, isn't it, in terms of who's going to take the maximum points over the finish line on the very final time, and therefore the double points here. I think they've got a fairly unassailable advantage in the front there between Canolo and Van Mark.
Yeah, although as you say that, there's...
it's coming together.
Still attacks coming thick and fast from that, what are we calling them now, the second group on the road. But as you say, the peloton is almost bridged that gap. I wonder which team has driven that shut. They look like white jerseys on the front. Would you say that's Sunweb or UAE have missed out, haven't they?
Yeah, I'm not sure who that was. Yeah, you're right, so we didn't see any UAE riders in that front group, so it might have been that they managed to get themselves together and try to chase things down. But yeah, interesting to see who was doing the chasing behind. But it looks like we've now got a 2-rider lead group with a very clear advantage over an individual rider, Garcia from Bahrain Merida, out there on the road, who you can see on your screen right now. And then a good 20 seconds or so back even from Garcia is the coming together of the lead group and the main peloton behind.
I'm just looking at data, Dan, because I'm quite intrigued to see what Sepp Van Mark is up to. I'm hoping that he is one of the riders, one of the 32 that's transmitting live data, because I suspect he is on the limit right now.
Right, well, lastly, although saying he's not the statistician of the day, He has been doing a spreadsheet.
That's Mike Evans on Twitter.
Oh, is it? Sorry, it's Mike Evans on Twitter. I beg your pardon. I should have known that last he wasn't that up with things. But anyway, Mike Evans on Twitter has done an accumulation of the current standings over the first 2 races. That being the sprint
this is
today
important stats.
and the climb yesterday. At the moment, Team Movistar are at the front on 158.5. As Mr. Bevan, the chocolate voice himself, told us, that is an unassailable lead now to second place Team Sunweb, because they've got a 20.5 advantage. As we see the current standings from the day on your screen right now. Sky in 3rd place provisionally on 135.6. That's just 2.4 away from Team Sunweb. And then it's quite a big gap back to quite a big gap back to Orica in 4th place at the moment on just 106.4. So it looks like Sky and Team Sunweb will be starting in 2nd or 3rd place tomorrow in the chase as things stand at the moment.
What about further back, Dan? Tell us who is looking to make that top race then at the end. Where are Cannondale Drapac?
Overall, over the 2 days, at the moment, they are in 12th place, and they've still got, if they want to get into those vital top 8 places overall, they need to pick up 43 points. So it's an impossibility for Cannondale Drapac to start in the A group tomorrow.
So the pressure on Van Mark's shoulders actually is lifted slightly. What's up for grabs today for him, I suppose, is the race victory, if we can call it as such. Could he get his arms in the air, even if they don't get the win overall?
Well, let's wait and see whether he does indeed raise his arms aloft, despite what has been quite a subpar performance over the last 2 days from the Cannondale Drapac squad. We shall find out in just 2 kilometres' time. The interesting point is that, as Si pointed out at the very beginning of today's broadcast, there are 2 separate groups tomorrow. So the first 8 teams will start last. They're in the Group A. Group B will start first. And Group B, which is the worst 8 teams in the first 2 days, they will have a chance of winning the final stage, but not the overall Hammer Series. Whereas the teams in the first 8 for Group A will have a chance of both. At the moment, in 8th place is Team Nippo Vini Fantini on 76.7. They are just 0.5 of a point behind the Quickstep Floors squad. I don't think anyone would have predicted that before the start of proceedings. But they have 9 points over Team Lotto Soudal. Let's not forget, this is double points available.
Well, and Canola is down the road, isn't he? And with him taking the sprint over Van Mark on the last lap, then you might think that he's secured their position in that A group, should we say, tomorrow.
Yeah, fantastic riding from Nippo Vini Fantini.
Yeah.
Just to remind you, we have got 16 teams racing this inaugural Hammer Series race. 12 of those are from the top tier of the professional sport, that being the World Tour, and 4 teams have been invited from the Pro Continental ranks. So Nippo Vini Fantini, with a far smaller budget and much lesser riders in their ranks than some of the other teams taking part. So they've really excelled themselves yesterday and today.
They have, but we talked yesterday, didn't we, about the different types of rider that could succeed in this format. And the fact is, being able to win 260 kilometre classics and stage races doesn't necessarily feature. I don't know about you, but I'd be really intrigued to know how a rider like Peter Sagan would get on in this kind of race. Undisputably, the world's best one-day racer, I suppose you could say at the moment.
Well, yeah. I mean, we often compare Fernando Gaviria to Peter Sagan, and he hasn't really featured at all so far today. Although you have to wonder whether it's a question of fatigue for him coming out of the Giro, or maybe even motivation as well after 3 hard weeks of racing around Italy. Very difficult to tell, isn't it? But it would be great to see Peter Sagan, the current world champion of cycling, on the road, taking part in a race like today, because you'd imagine it would suit him down to the ground.
You would, wouldn't you? Right, 600 metres to go now to the final sprint of today's stage. We've got 2 riders away, Marco Canola and Sep Van Mark, both of whom are looking to try and boost the performances of their teams overall. But then we've got a chase group not too far behind, looking to contest the final positions that are going to be point scoring.
Perhaps the most crucial then are where the Team Sunweb riders finish versus Team Sky. Movistar have won the first 2 days overall and will start tomorrow in first place in the chase, which is the team time trial. Meanwhile, at the front, Team Cannondale, who will start in the second group tomorrow, look like they're going to win the stage today. day, if you can call it that, with Sepp van Mark. He crosses the line
Arms
and
in the air.
he does raise his arms to the side. Well, he doesn't raise his arms,
Okay.
he puts his arms to the side. Canolo in second place. We've got Lotto Soudal there in third and Lotto NL Jumbo in fourth. I think it was only Team Sunweb who managed to pick up any points in the top 10 out of them and Team Sky. So it looks like our order in the chase tomorrow will firstly be Movistar, secondly be Team Sunweb, and thirdly being Team Sky. I think fourth on the day are going to be Orica Scott tomorrow. So we have got a very exciting final day in prospect for you. The overall standings today remain with Trek Segafredo leading proceedings. In the end, their lead cut short to just 9.7 points to Lotto Soudal. Cannondale Drapac, third place for them on the day. And probably slightly unfortunate for them that there were less laps on today's stage than there were yesterday, and therefore less points on offer.
That's a really important consideration, that, isn't it, Dan? Yesterday's climb stage actually is looking like it's going to play a really decisive role, even though it's just one stage of three. The fact there were many more points on offer, and we saw that breakaway group, because the stage was so hard, we literally saw the strongest riders in the race rise to the top. It gave Carlos Betancourt, the opportunity to amass a huge tally yesterday for his team.
Well, let's not forget, Si, that this is the inaugural Hammer Series race. It is a new concept which has come from Velon, which is a group of some of the World Tour teams, 10 of the World Tour teams, in fact, which are part of, 18 teams in the World Tour at the moment. I'm sure that this format is not set in stone and that they would welcome any feedback from the viewers as to what could make the viewing experience better and what could make the racing better. It's been great to hear from the riders as to what they thought about the racing over the last couple of days. All to play for tomorrow, of course. The winner will only be decided when that first team crosses the line. It's the fourth rider from that team who will stop the clock. So we could possibly envisage a very, very close final day chase tomorrow between the first few teams.
Did you see some of those faces on that slow-mo as they were crossing the line? You talked about poker faces in the pro peloton. I didn't see a single poker face as they crossed the line. I think those riders are empty.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine so. If we look at the current time of day, it's taken them just over 2 hours to complete the 99.2 kilometres that they've been dealing with today. So that, as you can work out very quickly, is an average speed of very close to 50 kilometres per hour for 2 hours of racing.
And on a circuit as well, so no prevailing wind. Yeah,
lots of corners to be dealt with, particularly here in the sports zone Limburg as they come across the line. There was a few corners to deal with, so that means that when they were out on those flat roadside that were going straight, they must have been doing 53, 54 kilometres per hour on average every single lap. And it wasn't a steady 53 or 54, was it? It was just multiple attacks the whole way through.
Yeah. Do you know what, Dan? Sepp van Mark deserves credit today because he's ridden a blinder. He crossed the line first at the end of the stage. It doesn't have quite the same kudos that it would do in a normal race. But that victory salute was perfect. We talked about whether it was appropriate for a rider to raise their arms aloft. He raised them, as you pointed out, to the side and pointed to his team. So, it's all about Cannondale Drapac. Maybe that was like a predetermined victory salute. It was like, right, just point to your jersey, lads. That's classy.
It had to be self-contained, didn't it? Slightly subdued in terms of celebration, because third place on the day for Cannondale Drapac. I guess it's going to take a while, isn't it, before riders can be sure over race radio that they have won the stage. And they can't exactly come across the line like you would do as a lead-out rider who's done his job with 200 metres to go and raise your arms aloft if your teammate has crossed the line first. You've still got a job to do, even as if you're in with a chance of crossing the line in the first 10 places on the last lap, you've got to go right the way to the line, haven't you?
Do you know what's going to be beautiful about tomorrow, in many respects? But one of them is that the first team across the line tomorrow in the team time trial will be the winners, won't they?
Yep.
So they will all raise their arms aloft, which you wouldn't normally get in a team time trial.
Well, we've been given overall team standings with bonus points, they being from yesterday, of course, where Team Movistar picked up those 15 bonus seconds. Team Sunweb picked up 12 seconds in second place. Where did Team Sunweb finish today? I'm trying to remember now. I think they were second or third, weren't they?
I can't remember, to be honest with you, mate.
We'll get some information on that fairly shortly. Sorry, they were 5th on the overall standings today. So they, I think, Si, despite finishing 2nd overall to Movistar, will pick up more points in the more bonus seconds to take in tomorrow's to chase.
I think those graphics were yesterday's graphics, weren't they?
Yeah.
So it's still going to be fascinating to find out exactly what is the final lineup and the order of that top 8.
Well, hopefully before we finish our live coverage of today's Hammer Series, we will get final confirmation of the order and indeed the time gaps between the teams as they set off on the chase tomorrow. To remind you, 2 groups of 8 teams will be setting off tomorrow. The worst 8 from the first 2 stages will start first. They will complete their chase before the second group starts. And Movistar will be leading that second group off as the team that has accumulated the most points over the first 2 stages. And all that remains to be seen is just how many seconds they have in advantage of the second team off tomorrow, which is Team Sunweb.
And then, crucially, who's got the best technique and the most horsepower?
Yeah.
It's going to be absolutely fascinating tomorrow, isn't it?
I wonder if Team Sunweb can persuade Tom Dumoulin to come back from his rest.
Absolutely.
And help them tomorrow.
Yeah, really, really interesting to see that. Because everything, although we've had 2 fantastic events in the last 2 days, everything is to play for still tomorrow for the overall. And fundamentally, that is the important thing about this Hammer Series. Which team is going to come out on top at the end of the team time trial chase tomorrow?
Right, well, we will be back on air, won't we, tomorrow at 1:40 roughly UK time.
You haven't burnt too many matches today, have you, Dan? 'Cause it's been a big couple of days.
Well, you have to go in you've got to go all in from the start.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, full gas from the start.
As a commentator as well as a rider, you can't leave anything for the finish.
It's been really hard today, isn't it? Yeah, maybe you got to dig deep. You got to dig deep. Tom, what's the comments been like on the on social? How have people felt about today's stage? Yesterday was clearly an epic, but what about today?
Yeah, they seem to be really loving today's stage, actually. They were all saying that they felt it was like a crit. A few people corrected your pronunciation of Kermes. Apparently it's Kermes course. I don't know how to pronounce that either.
All right.
But yeah, no, everyone seemed really into it, seemed to be really enjoying the new format. Even if I think at times they were saying that they didn't know which team was in the lead, just the sight of the individual riders basically taking it in turns to smash each other seemed to go down really well.
Well, to be fair, I mean, that is a lot of what's great about bike racing, isn't it? Is watching people, I think, as I said earlier, at their absolute limit. That's what we want to see. That's what all the classics are about. I think we talked about it in a GCN show, actually, just after the Tour of Flanders, about what does make a classic. And I think a big part of it is seeing riders at their limit, whether it's because the race is super long or whether it's because they've just been going full gas.
We had a comment on Twitter, Si, saying that if you're having to question whether or not the rider that crosses the finish line first should salute or not, then something's wrong. It is a different concept, isn't it? This race. It is about the teams. I think we need to give it some time to sort of settle in and to gather our own thoughts really on how the racing has played out. And of course, wait for tomorrow's team chase as well to see how exciting or not, as the case may be, tomorrow's final races, which is going to deem us our overall winners.
Yeah.
I guess it's a little bit like 2 legs of a Champions League semi-final, isn't it? Where you might not necessarily win the second leg, but you might still have got yourself through to the final, so you can still celebrate despite losing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you draw parallels with football there, because cycling.
Because I know nothing about it.
Well, yeah. Firstly, that was a bold statement, but no, I think cycling is a team sport that is won by individuals. So it's a common kind of phrase that. And often people find it a little bit unfair that we may, celebrate Chris Froome for winning the Tour de France, when in actual fact his 8 teammates give everything for it, but yet they don't really get celebrated as such. And so I think the brilliant thing about this Hammer Series is that although we may not get a rider, deservedly putting both arms in the air on stages 1 and stage 2, but what we do get is a whole team that is then going to be saluted at the end of it all. Right then, I think we're going over to hear from the winning team, Trek Segafredo.
Sprinting and then those laps with double points, it was full gas every lap.
And every rider contributing. Matthias Brunel, we saw you on the attack and using your time trial skills to go out and take some points, but how hard was it to recover after an effort like that and get back in the group and then do it again?
Yeah, we played today with different tactics. We had sprinters, we had time trialists like me, so we went on attack, we waited for a sprint. I knew I had to do a long sprint, so I did like a 500-meter sprint. But after that, like I was so only hanging on the peloton and somehow survived till the line.
And Jasper Stuyven, was it somewhat confusing during the race to try and figure out if you had teammates in front, what had to be done, tried to chase or go across a gap?
I think today we did really good, and we always had one guy in the front, and I think that was the biggest advantage, because we never had to chase, and it was really was full on the race from start to finish. So it was we were all in front the whole time, so it was good to keep the view.
So Greg Daniel must feel great to get a win with a team like this in the Hammer Sprint.
Yeah, it's really great. The team rode really well, and this is my official last race with the national champ jersey, so I'm glad that I was able to be here with the team.
And Jackman Zola in the national champion of Italy jersey. What a difficult race, a difficult scenario to have to sprint so many times.
Well, it was really difficult today. Since the beginning we went full gas, all the laps was really a war. But in the end we were racing well and everybody were in the right move, so we're happy.
Well, congratulations to Trek Segafredo, and get ready for the Hammer Chase tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure, thank you.
There you go, guys, the winning team getting ready to spray the champagne.
Well, celebrations all around for a victory on day 2 of the Hammer Series in the sprint for Trek Segafredo, Boy van Poppel, Matthias Brendley. We had Jasper Stuyven taking part for them as well as the American champion Gregory Daniel and the Italian champion Jackman Zola. Good job done by them today. However, did they make it into the first 8 of the overall classification? According to our man on Twitter, who's been helping us out with a spreadsheet, no, they didn't. They will be starting in Group 2 tomorrow. They finished in 10th place in the overall classification after the first 2 days. And the big team side, as well as Trek, that have missed out on those crucial first 8 places, Quick Step Floors.
Really?
Yeah, 9th place overall for the Belgian squad.
Wow, they will be ruining the loss of Fernando Gaviria, surely. Down to 4 members of that team quite early on. Clearly, like you say, may have had a problem or may just have been under par following a heavy Giro d'Italia. His first ever Grand Tour, wasn't it?
It was his first ever Grand Tour. I think the last rider to... Sorry, was I yawning on camera?
You were, yeah.
The last rider to win 4 stages of his first ever Grand Tour was the Frenchman Bernardino, which was quite some time ago now. So Gaviria getting his Grand Tour career off to a quite incredible start.
And Exalted Company, we mustn't forget as well that you did the Giro d'Italia just last month, so perhaps you haven't quite fully recovered from that as well.
Yeah, that is my excuse for yawning.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But nevertheless, still, I think there is a lot to be gained for Trek. They may well not be in that final 8, but I think winning a stage or event of the Hammer Series, I think is enough to mean that they can come out of this with their heads held high. Do you think?
Yes, and I think the team that we can really hold their heads high are Nippo Vini Fantini. I mean, if you look at the overall classification, we were about to get our starting time gaps there, but they've just flicked off our screen, so we will head back over to that.
More maths needed,
as soon as we get to it. If you look at the overall standings, 3 of the invited teams, so Israel Cycling Academy, Kakarural, as well as the Roompot NL Netherlands Lottery team, they were in the last 3 places overall. Starting time gaps... Don't understand that, sorry.
No, that's an interesting graphic now. I'm not entirely sure what that one means, actually, because presumably that doesn't refer to starting order.
No, because Movistar in 5th place there. Apologies, we can't make head or tail of the graphic you are currently seeing on the screen right now.
Unless it's not total aggregated points, Dan. In actual fact, you get points for your position on the day, and then that adds up, because that really changes things around, doesn't it?
It would do. Maybe you're right, Si.
Very much so indeed. Movistar not looking in quite such a strong position there.
Oh dear. Right, so we have to do all of our calculations all over again, which
Where's
we've
the rule book,
feverishly looking at. We thought it was a combination of the points actually scored over the stages, but it looks as though it is actually the points allocated in terms of bonus seconds at the end of each stage. We will get back to you with that as soon as we possibly can.
I tell you what, the racing is frenetic, and actually what goes on behind the scenes is equally fascinating, isn't it? How we're going to get to the finish, which is fortunately mercifully straightforward to calculate, and that is the first team across the line tomorrow, or will be the winners, won't they? The fourth rider of that first team is going to stop the clock.
Yeah, possibly the biggest stumbling block for this race was the fact that we were put in charge of explaining the rules not very well.
I gave you credit twice today, and maybe I shouldn't have done.
Anyway, hopefully soon on our screens we will get the graphic which tells us the starting order for tomorrow's crucial chase race, which concludes the Hammer Series here in Limburg, and indeed the time bonus seconds between each one, and therefore how far in front the first team off will start ahead of the second team and the third team, etc. But we wait for those graphics to come up in a few moments' time.
I'll tell you what, Dan, we talk often about in a Grand Tour the accumulated fatigue levels of a rider and impacting their ability to ride a time trial. Given how savage the last 2 days have been, despite short, they clearly have been taking their toll on riders. Do you think that's going to play a part tomorrow in the team time trial?
I'm not sure, because it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, 2 hours isn't going to take as much out of you as a very hard 5 or 6 hour classics race, for example, or even a very hard stage of a Grand Tour. So despite the fact that you've dug very deep, it should be, in theory, slightly easier to recover from overnight before the team time trial than you would otherwise expect if you dug deep for a full 5 or 6 hours. But I guess that remains to be seen. And there are a couple of teams, as I said, with Quick Step in Zdenek Stibar and with Team Sky's Owain Dould. Neither of those riders have taken part in either of the first 2 races, although they were named on the initial list. Whether or not they're not actually here, and they were just named on the initial starting list, decided to not take part at all, remains to be seen. But if it's not the case, we could have quite a few very, very fresh riders coming into tomorrow.
Yeah, let's look at the lineups for the team time trial then tomorrow. Who on paper, irrespective of start order, is looking like they're going to be the strongest team? For me, I wonder whether BMC...
Well, BMC have got an enormous pedigree when it comes to team time trialling, and a very good coach in the form of Marco Pinotti, haven't they? But it's a different team which they bring here to the Hammer Series than it is to what they've had at the World Championship
but they've
team
got
time trial.
Stefan Kuhn, Daniel Ross, and Kinziato. I think should take some credit as being a strong boy. So that's 3 out of 5 that are, you know, truly world class team time trialers.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be fascinating tomorrow. But here we speak to the overall winners from the first couple of stages, we understand.
Team to go out and score more points to assure yourselves of a good position for the Hammer Chase. How tough was it out there with all those sprints?
It was unbelievable. There were a lot of good sprinters in the bunch, and at one point there was a crash. And I think Caleb Ewan crashed and some other guys. So it changed the whole race again, and it was actually only attacking the whole time through, and it made it so hard. We tried to cover the brakes, but yeah, Ramon Sinkeldama was crashed as well, so we were with 4. We wanted to keep the sprinter behind, so with 3 guys it's really hard. But it's a nice way of racing. It's tough to do.
And now going into tomorrow's Hammer Chase, you guys are in pole position. You start first with a few seconds advantage over Team Sky. Is it a little bit scary having Team Sky, renowned as a strong team time trial squad, starting just seconds behind you?
Yeah, I think it's always scary that so close a team is starting behind you. But we will do our best, and we have also a strong team, and we will just go for it.
So today out there, trying to decide if you wait for a sprint or try and get in a breakaway, or knowing if you had teammates up the road, was that one of the most difficult things, knowing what was going on?
Yeah, normally I should fully focus on the sprint, but it was a difficult situation because there was really no control in the bunch. I think my teammates and me tried to do our best and tried to be in as much groups as possible. And in the end, I focused a little bit on the sprints. We had 2 really good lead-outs, and I could score.
So well done, Team Sunweb, starting first tomorrow in the Hammer Chase and trying to hold off every other team in that chase. So good luck, guys. Well done. Go and recover.
Thanks. You just block the road.
Okay then, right, that was good to hear from Team Sunweb there. Dan, going back to the strongest teams for the team time trial, how do you think Sunweb will fare, whether or not the Moulin is going to be in the mix?
Well, he would have been pretty crucial, wouldn't he, to a team time trial?
You'd think.
In terms of the amount of work that he could have done on the front compared to some of the other riders. They won't be bad. I don't doubt that they will put in a very good performance in the team time trial tomorrow. Here's an explanation coming up for you at the moment in the corner of our screen as to what the chase is all about. In fact, we've got a full screen there for you at the moment.
The best team
trying to explain what the combination is.
First and will be chased by all the others. There are fixed base time gaps for each ranking, starting with 30 seconds between the first and second team, then 25 seconds, 20 seconds, and from 5th position the base time gap stays at 15 seconds. In addition to that, there will be bonus time gaps based on extra seconds won by the top 10 teams in the climb and the sprint. A first place rewards 15 seconds, a second place 12 seconds, a third place 10 seconds, and so on. The team's accumulated bonus seconds from the first 2 days will be netted off against each other to determine the bonus time gap. Adding the base time gap and the bonus time gap will result in the total time gap that each team takes into the final discipline of the Hammer Series.
Right then, well there's an explanation as to how things will be panning out for tomorrow's chase, which we will be covering live here on YouTube and on Facebook at the Global Cycling Network. As things stand, we understand that Team Sunweb, the local Dutch squad, in fact they're German now, aren't they, Team Sunweb, will be starting off in first place. They have accumulated just 7 points, so second place on day one, 5th place today on the sprint stage.
There's the gap, in fact, Dan.
Oh, so 30 seconds exactly to Team Sky, because they picked up exactly the same number of bonus seconds. A further 29 seconds after that, Lotto Soudal will roll down the start line. Further 20 seconds after that, Nippo Vini Fantini in 4th. What a ride they did over the last couple of days. Movistar, contrary to what we've been saying so far, rolling down the start ramp in 5th place. At 85 seconds, so 1 minute
That's a big
25.
deficit, isn't it? A big old deficit to claw back in a team time trial, and one of which is just 50 kilometres long.
Yeah, and we are assuming that every team will just ride their race tomorrow, or will they? Will they go steady throughout as they would do for a normal team time trial? Or will they try and go harder at the start, either to keep other teams behind them or indeed to chase them down, which is the concept of the race?
Presumably there's nothing to be gained from catching the team in front. It's
No.
not like a pursuit on the track where they're then, you know, effectively out of the race. So I would have thought the tactics will be ride your own race irrespective of the other teams around you and simply try and block them out. But that's easier said than done, because it's you know, when you've got a hare dangling in front of you, that's when you really can make mistakes.
You can't afford to have too many problems on tomorrow's chase, can you? Because 5 riders at the start for the team time trial, which is very different to the normal 9 that we see at a Grand Tour team time trial, and it is the 4th rider across the line. So normally it's 9 riders at start in a team time trial at the Grand Tour, and it's the 5th riders placing across the line which stops the clock. That is going to be very different between that and 5 riders starting and the 4th rider across the line. You can't afford to dig too deep with one rider and lose them early on, because then you've only got your 4 riders left.
Yeah, you know what, it reminds me of that legendary team time trial in the Tour de France a few years back, where the Slipstream team were down to 5 early on, and they were riding for, was it Van der Velde's GC position? And they rode the time trial of their lives, didn't they? But as a 5, with no riders still to drop for the majority of the race, it was a great performance.
I think they almost beat Astana on the day, didn't they? I think it was Dave Miller, Ryder Hesjedal, Zabriskie, Van der Velde, and... Let us know in the comment section, just down below. We need to wrap things up for our broadcast today. Hope you've enjoyed the coverage of Day 2 of the Hammer Series, that being the sprint. Thanks to Tom Lars for bringing all the comments from you as viewers over the last couple of hours. From myself and Si, it's goodbye for now. But make sure you join us tomorrow for the finale, which is the chase at 2:40 Central European time or 1:40 British Summer Time.